Welcome back to the Monolith Filmcast, folks. Your one-stop shop for the two Doobie brothers themselves, Jake and Isaac, the two biggest stoners you know. And this week, the one other person that we know who's personally never partaken, not even in water's your exclusive beverage of choice, right?
Right.
But yes, this week we are joined by Makenna. Makenna, introduce yourself for us today.
Gladly. My name is Makenna Marie Montano.
Full name.
I love long walks in the dark, and
Wow.
I love all forms of cannabis. Just kidding. I've never ever tried it in my life.
For sure.
Anybody that might know me in any type of professional setting, the next 55 minutes or so is all a bit. So
It's all for the bit. Yeah, exactly.
that's right. Take this all with a grain of salt.
And not only that, but this episode is also exclusively filmed in a exact replica of our studio,
Yeah.
but in the heart of Denver, Colorado.
Yeah. Love the state.
Love the state.
Love the state. Love the city. Windy City, they
Can't
call
get
it.
enough. That is what they call it.
The Mile High Windy City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention it, but I'm Isaac and this is Jake.
Shaggy, this isn't weed.
Where's that from?
It's from a mini golf song.
Yeah,
it's Scooby-Doo.
This week,
I
folks.
think it's so funny because it's a Shaggy voice when he's saying Shaggy. This isn't weed. What is it? It's just funny.
Good
Sorry.
stuff.
Continue.
This is the Monolith Filmcast, and this week, folks, we are doing a honorable 420 episode. And so we're going to be talking about all things weed movies this week, folks. And yeah, that's what we're talking about this week. But
Wee.
shut. Get ready for a lot more of that. But before we get into that, let's recap last week's top 5.
Talk about touching some grass.
Talk about Jake's going to need to touch some grass soon, folks, because it was brutal. It was a bloodbath. Jake, you want to talk about it?
Not really. Not
Here's
really.
what we'll
No,
do.
I don't.
I do have a couple shout outs to give. We got a couple cross-platform votes this week, which was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
We got one vote on the YouTube. Whoa, I accidentally started playing the video. That's my bad. Kayla said, longtime listener, first time voter. My vote this week has to go to Isaac. All 5 of his songs sold me, but even just the honorable mention of Turnstile is an automatic win. Classic. Thank you for the vote, Kayla. Shout out. Great taste.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Or whatever.
And then when you go to Instagram, that's where things just get...
Just get what?
Just get rough.
Why don't you go ahead
just
and
get
say it?
rough for Jake.
I just want to point out, we didn't choose these.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is
All
a
these
good
were
point.
shuffled.
Total random.
Yeah.
I could have been, and in fact, I do think I was thinking about it, and I was like, I mean, I could have gotten a lot worse songs that could have gotten like 5 Death Grip.
I can't
songs in
believe
a row.
the main thing that's really distracting about this is I left last episode feeling fairly confident.
Yeah,
I did.
I mean, I will
felt-
say I was a little shaken. I was like, fuck, man, this is pretty close.
I at least expected not a blowout. I didn't expect to be buried alive in your votes.
Yeah, pinky toe sticking out is the only thing.
Shit.
Dave grabbed you by the pinky toe and pulled you out a little bit and then walked away.
Dave's
That's
the only
about
one who
it.
came to my funeral.
Yeah, did anyone else vote for you?
Not even my mom. Not even my own mother.
Ethan didn't come, or no, Ethan did vote for you.
Ethan came for me.
But he did let us know that we spelled plush wrong. It's with 2 L's. And that was my bad. I made the graphic, so.
Yeah.
But anyone else want
Is your guys' king? Can't even spell plush.
Yeah, what can you say? Tough one though. This was a fun one, and I'll gladly carry this win. But we'll see if Jake can win us back this week, or if we'll get our first ever guest win when we do the top 5 later on this week.
Over my dead goddamn body.
So what does that put us
Pretty
at now?
confident.
3-2?
Something like that.
Something like that. We'll figure it out. We'll get the scoreboard up here soon
you actually
enough.
put that in there?
Huh?
Whenever I feel like you gesture a lot behind you. Do you actually put that stuff in the video?
like a physical scoreboard I would like to get
Oh,
in the studio.
okay.
The hell was that?
Sounds like Molly.
That was my stomach. Sorry.
Every time there's a weird noise, it's just Makenna's stomach. Okay. But that is it. Thanks to everyone who voted out there. We will move on.
We brought Molly to Denver. That's why she's barking.
That's right. Yeah. That's Molly Jones. Shouldn't say people's last name on this podcast.
Especially.
No one knows who Molly Jones is not listening to this episode. All right, let's dive
Lost her
into the newsroom this week, folks. Here we go. Makenna, very excited to hear your take on some of these.
I'm very excited to give it.
We talked about Will Smith getting banned. We talked about that last week.
We did.
Okay.
I loved it, by the way.
Thank
Great
you.
commentary,
Thank you,
especially
thank
about Amy Schumer. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I was worried I came off a little too woman hatery.
Speaking
Say.
of, actually, before we get too deep into the news, I
Sure.
think there's one small little thing that came out kind of relating to that this week that I kind of wanted to bring up just so
Okay.
we can not clarify anything,
Sure.
but just to say a piece on it. Apparently, since the Oscars, Amy Schumer's been getting like a lot of death threats.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Just to
no.
be clear, that's fucking awful.
Yeah, no, that's not cool.
That's in no way something we're
that
happy
is
about.
Pretty much the exact same camp of like and totally overreacting response to people being like, Will Smith needs to go to the death penalty.
Exactly. So yeah, that's pretty fucked up though.
Yeah, that's very fucked up. Okay, here we go. First up in the newsroom, a secret David Lynch film starring Laura Dern is expected to premiere at the Cannes Film Festival.
Those two.
Now, this news was followed up by David Lynch saying he does not have a new movie at Cannes this year, which all but confirms that he has a movie at Cannes this year. Because I don't trust a damn fucking word that guy says.
He's a dirty damn liar, isn't he?
He is a dirty damned liar. Now, we can kind of rest on this news for a bit, just in general. This is very exciting, and I do think it's true. Because Inland Empire has its restoration tour going on right now, which is kind of funny because that movie's filmed on like a home camcorder. I'm like, I don't really know what there is to restore. It looks like shit. It's going to look like more HD shit.
Yeah.
I'll still probably go see it in theaters, but that's just a funny movie to say it has a restoration of. And there has been a lot of like weird leaks about secret projects he may or may not be working on over the last couple of years. There was the meeting where he had with some Netflix executives apparently. So we will see. But the Cannes Festival lineup this year in general, absolutely stacked. Bangers back to back. I told Steven when we were at work, I've never wanted to be an industry nepotism baby so bad, other than this year. We've got...
I'll buy that for a second.
That I've never wanted to more than this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
We have got the David Cronenberg Crimes of the Future movie. New trailer came out. Did you guys watch that?
Oh, yeah.
No, but I will tell you, Tumblr is a light over
Really?
that movie.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be fucking good. It's basically, the tagline for that movie says like, surgery is the new sex. Which is like, whatever weird, scary body horror thing that's going to be is... I'm there for that.
The trailer especially is so metallic and fleshy looking.
Very Titan feeling.
It's going to be disgusting. I'll be there day one.
Park Chan-wook's new film, Decision to Leave, is going to premiere at Cannes with a new poster. Park Chan-wook, the director of Old Boy and The Handmaiden. Gonna be good. I know there's some other ones that I'm missing. I remember there's a bunch of shit premiering at Cannes this year. It's going to be a great year for Cannes. Really wish I was going to be able to see it.
That about a nice pair of cans.
Yeah. In similar news, we also lost Gilbert Gottfried this week.
Oh, shit.
Now,
Great set of cans. Lost in history.
I did contemplate introducing this news by saying, we lost another one! Because, now let me preface that also by saying, Makenna would have backed me up on this. He would have appreciated it.
You're right.
Absolutely.
He would have, I think.
Made a dead Gilbert joke already.
And Gilbert Gottfried, it is pretty sad. I don't know if there's really many details about it or anything. It just kind of said he died after a long battle with an illness. They didn't really go into specifics. Pretty sad. One of the funniest things I have seen from Gilbert Gottfried, if I can play it for you really fast.
I think I was about to bring up the same video. Is it him like in a studio or something?
No, though are you talking about when he reads 50 Shades of Grey?
That must be it.
That's pretty funny.
Oh god, that's so funny.
That's pretty funny too. But he was on Cameo, and there is this band. You know what Cameo is, right?
I'm familiar.
There's this band called Portrayal of Guilt, who paid him to announce their new album. I'm gonna go ahead and play this Cameo for you guys really fast, so you can take a listen to this. Here we go. This is Gilbert Gottfried, Portrayal of Guilt album announcement.
Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried to announce that Portrayal of Guilt released a new album this Friday. Listen to the new Portrayal of Guilt album. Christ fucker. Out now on Run for Cover Records.
Hilarious that he did that. So
God.
shout
What an
out,
iconic voice.
Shout out Gilbert Gottfried.
Just a landmark in comedy, like just vocal comedy.
Absolutely. Shout out Christ Fucker album. It's pretty good. Not for everyone, for sure. But yeah,
To differ.
fucker.
There's something for everybody.
exactly. What was your guys? Did you watch anything with him in it other than Cyber Chase?
I'd have to look into it. I'm sure there's some stuff I've seen with him
Yeah.
in it. I just can't think of it off the top of my head. I feel like there's tons of things I watched, especially when I was a kid, that he just was in.
Definitely.
Iago is an icon. What I told you, I'm mostly, you know, Iago from Aladdin.
Oh, okay, yes.
It's not wrong. Second guessing.
No, I think
I
you're right.
mentioned-
I just didn't. I was like, wait, what? Okay,
I did
you're right.
mostly see like the roasts. I told you, roast of
Yeah.
Hitler, classic.
And he was really
required
funny in
viewing.
those as well.
Well, GG.
GG.
Pour one out into your
was
carpet.
Good. That was good.
Thank
Light one up for Gilbert. What a name too, Gilbert. First
Gilbert.
name. Interesting to think about people's first names only. Gilbert. You look at a baby and you're like, that's a Gilbert. See, they
Like
got
Gil.
lucky because they called a baby Gilbert, and then when he could talk, they were like, okay, good call.
Yeah, that's a great
Good
point.
call. All right, up next, Adam Sandler and the Safdie brothers are reportedly working on a new project together. Jake, you sent this one. Tell us about it.
Wow, very, very few details. Literally just the vice president, I think, of damn it, IndieWire. Just said like, yeah, they're working on a new project, and then just did not elaborate at all on that. So that's where the news starts and ends, everybody.
Starts
But it
and
sure is
ends.
exciting, isn't it?
That is very exciting.
Can't wait to
Perfect
see that in
story.
5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it for the newsroom. The only last update for the news is that we got one more Jazz update. This is the Friday before game 1 of round 1 of the Jazz versus the Mavs playoff series. Mavs star players out with a calf injury, so we'll hopefully take them down. Sorry. Rest in
about
peace
Veal.
to that guy's calf, but we're taking it. So we might not be round 1 exits, round 2 maybe. But
Jared, I said about Veal.
yeah, it was a good one. I just didn't really. The wheels were already turning, and I just had to kind of laugh.
I just
in my
wanted to
own
make
head.
sure you heard it.
Yeah, I did hear it. It was good. I'm glad you clarified that. Okay, perfect. I think that's it for the newsroom. Unless you got any, is there any other news off the top of my head that we missed?
I thought you were going to mention that the Jazz got their asses kicked. No?
No, we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, okay.
We can talk.
That's
Listen,
fine.
I said they're probably gonna lose,
I just thought
and they did lose.
Listen,
Listen,
I just thought you would want to talk about it.
I want to go into the playoffs and act like they aren't the team that they are.
In denial, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. And they also announced they actually did just say that they have an NFT. They have an NFT collection that just went on sale today.
Jazz?
Yeah, did you
Fuck
not
the
see that
Jazz.
tweet?
No, I didn't see
Oh
that.
my
Let me
god,
see
look
it.
at this.
I'm a Jazz hater.
That's what I said to them.
What is that?
the Jazz bear
that's
with a
disgusting,
Binky in its
dude.
mouth.
Oh, I
God
hate
awful.
that.
God awful.
Dude,
So
I hope they lose tomorrow. I said it.
so we'll see what happens. By the time you're listening to this, we'll know where the Jazz, if they're 0-1 or 1-0. So we'll see. But that's it for the newsroom. Up next is the Monolith Must Watch of the Week.
Mana must watch.
Jake, get us started because I've got the beer burps for sure.
Well, all I have to say about this one is if you're going without it, it's a shame. Because that rug really ties the room together. I'm talking about The Big Lebowski, everybody. Amazing movie. Absolutely lovely, amazing movie. Coen Brothers directed it.
Yeah, my favorite Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah, probably mine as well. Jeff Bridges stars. Oh my God. Probably my favorite John Goodman role ever. Steve Buscemi
Hilarious.
has a wonderful, damn it. What's the thing when it's not a lead actor, but they're supporting role.
Right.
He's great in it, but Jeff Bridges, dude, as the dude is amazing.
Incredible.
That movie balances just very subtle, small things that are like just kind of funny, but the way they're going about it makes it really funny. Like there's a part in the movie where the dude gets out of a limo and then is immediately escorted to another limo. Just a dumb thing that's just really funny. And in between that, there's just these explosive, absurdist comedy scenes like where Walter pulls out a handgun and points it at this fucking poor guy at the bowling
Isn't
alley.
it Donnie?
No, it's not
Oh,
Donnie.
that's right. It's that other
It's
guy.
Smokey.
That's right.
He says,
Yeah.
Smokey, this is not Nam. This is bowling. There are rules. It's
He's
just
obsessed with Vietnam.
yeah, it's just such a good blend of both those types of humor and just such great characters and writing in the middle of it. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I can watch that movie every couple months, I think. Take away something new from it. It's so good.
My absolute favorite line. That movie gets funnier and fucking funnier every goddamn
I know. I
time
was so
watch
happy
it.
to see you gave it the 10.
I finally,
was like, hell
it
yeah,
finally
dude.
hit the 10 for me because it is like watching it this time. I was like, "There's nothing I don't like about this movie." It's so
It's
fucking
so
funny.
dude.
And the one line that is just so goddamn funny is when the dude is like, it's like Lennon says, man. And he's like going on. And then Donnie just keeps being like, I am the walrus.
I am the walrus?
And then John Goodman's finally like, V.I. Lenin, Donnie, Vladimir Ilyich Udvid Lenin.
And how like
Oh my
upset
God.
he looks
He's
is so funny.
fucking mad. So funny. So
I can get you
funny.
a tow by 3 o'clock.
I can get you fucking toe, no problem. I can get you toe, no problem. Yeah, great stuff.
Inspired
Oh.
religion. Dude,
Philip Seymour
It's
Hoffman.
true. Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh.
Classic.
Amazing, man.
Shout out to Push. PSH.
Yeah. Classic. Yeah, his role in that is also just another one. I'm like, what a highlight reel in his range, dude.
Absolutely.
Oh God.
He really can do it all.
How like uncomfortable. Yeah. Anyways, he's great in it. Great fucking movie. One of my favorites of all time.
My must watch of the week is, I know we've talked about this movie before on the podcast, but I went and saw it again in theaters this week. 70th anniversary of this movie. Singing in the Rain.
I'll bring my umbrella.
You should. 1952, co-directed by Gene Kelly. I can't remember the other guy that directed it off the top of my head, but stars Debbie Reynolds, Gene Kelly. Those are the only two names I can think of. Also, actually, Rita Moreno's in the movie apparently, which I was like, I didn't know she was in that. For a 1952 movie, it is surprisingly timeless in terms of its comedy. It is hilarious. So many iconic, funny lines. The songs are all great. Learned a lot of new stuff. Watching it in the theaters this time, it was like a TCM special. I don't know if you've ever watched TM. Is it TCM? Turner's Classic Movies. Yeah, TCM. And their host did like a little pre and post show right before and after the movie, and he was just like talking about some of it. And they talk about specifically how Gene Kelly had a 103 degree temperature when they filmed the actual like singing in the rain, the titular scene, just because he was soaking wet all day long, and he was wearing a wool suit, and it like shrunk on him, and so he was just so sick and just fucking. You would never know. He's a trooper, and he handles it. He handles his business. But that movie is so good. I really do think it kind of transcends its time. It's really good. I love it. Singing in the Rain is my monolith must watch if you haven't seen it.
You want to give us a song?
You want me to sing a song for you?
I'm trying to remember like the main theme of that song that's really catchy.
Singing in the rain, just singing. And then you've probably heard Good Morning.
Good Morning. That's
Yeah,
the song I'm thinking of.
yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. Great songs.
That's one, like, where they sing about dancing, right? There's all that great moving furniture in the background.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Great movie.
Talk about a wake and
Great
bake.
It's also really funny because when she's singing that song, it's
Stoner
1:30 a.m.
I love
And
that.
so it's like, I guess it's
it.
technically morning, but yeah.
We talked the whole night through.
Yeah,
What?
Oh, you're right. That's
better?
true. That's the other thing that was interesting to find out this time is that all of the songs were written before the script. So they built a script around an existing set of songs that they were written for a movie, but they were like, oh, God, I guess we'll just make up this movie for it. Plot's really good and everything. Singing in the Rain.
Yeah, and hilarious.
Hilarious.
I'll give you that.
Hilarious.
Genuinely laugh out loud funny.
Oh, yeah. What about you, Makenna? What's your must-watch movie of the week?
All right. Well, speaking of laugh out loud funny, I had the absolute pleasure of rewatching Napoleon Dynamite this week.
Wow.
And I will say, like, that is one where simple writing, simple shots, iconic imagery. I love that it was filmed just a stone's throw away in Idaho, but just so many like classic, simple, even like zero dialogue. You guys remember there's a scene where Napoleon Dynamite is talking to his brother Kip on the phone, and Kip is just grating cheese over a plate of tortilla chips. And just every single time it cuts back to Kip, that pile of cheese grows and grows. And that alone was like so funny. And I was thinking of like not stoner related movies that can definitely be considered like stoner media. I would absolutely consider that one of them.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. That is an interesting distinction just in general with stoner movies that remind me to bring that back up later.
Yeah,
but
I think that will be a hot button topic. And I'm also glad you said that one, McKenna, because during our 2000s comedies ranked, Napoleon Dynamite was on both of our lists.
yeah, and people are shitting on that.
I know. That's what, and I honestly can't really help but blame him because I'm like, yeah, if you watch that when you're a kid and the only sort of thought you give it is like a reflection on it back then, yeah, you might think like, yeah, the movie's dumb. I only liked it because of the kid. Yeah. No, watch it again.
It's funny. It's a funny movie. Yeah.
I'll say I appreciated it less as a kid because it came out
absolutely.
probably like, gosh, when I was in third grade,
Yeah.
maybe third or fourth grade. And oh yeah, transcends.
Yeah.
It's also just a really funny movie to watch as like a non-form. It's like one of the most non-Mormon Mormon movies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like where it's like it's not necessarily made for Mormon people, but it's made understanding I feel like who Mormon people are to a point. Just like some of their lifestyle and everything is just, God, it's just so funny. The nacho cheese part specifically is pretty funny because I'm like, I remember when I was a kid, I used to make my nachos like that, throw them in the microwave.
I think just, they're playing like 80s music at the prom.
Mhm.
All of these outfits are so retro. I just think it shows like small towns, right? Rural towns specifically. There's a very like closed community kind of center of interest with the whole film. And it's also like this could take place at any time in American history.
Yeah, literally
about the same
anywhere,
things.
anytime America.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's also just a lot of really standout moments in that movie that I feel like they're just never going to leave my brain. Like the whole part where Rico's trying to sell Tupperware.
Oh.
That part is so funny. And like he's like, he tells the husband, how about you go ahead and tear that in half for me? And he's just like trying really hard. And the wife just looks like
She's getting
so
so
disappointed.
disgusted. She files
Oh
for
my
divorce
God.
that night.
Yeah, literally.
And just even
So
just like
fucking
over
funny.
the top stupid shit where Rico's like, I'm going to hug this steak at Napoleon on his bike.
Or he's like watching throw this over that mountain right there.
Honestly.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
classic.
A lot of subtle
great
comedy
choice.
in that one, yeah.
Thank you.
Great choice.
Wonderful choice.
Okay, I think that's it for the Monolith Must Watch of the week. Are we ready to dive into our main topic?
It's time to light up.
It's time to light up, folks.
On the edge of my seat.
I hope you've
Spark
got
it up.
more of those. Yeah, don't blow your wad too yet soon, Jake. Save it a little bit. Edge yourself a little for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, we don't want to be
please.
smoking resin.
God, you're really burning through these ones. Okay, here we go. We're going to dive into the main topic this week, folks. I know I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're talking about 420 movies and everything this week. So, to get us started, and I would like to also, as a disclaimer, remind everybody that this episode is in Colorado, and everything is also a lie in a bit for the show.
Yep.
So,
Beautiful
the-
Boulder, Colorado.
yeah, so to all the family
Windy
members
City, they call
or, potential employers out there, this is just a joke.
Or acting.
Exactly. So,
Experimental art piece.
I want to start by asking
School
you guys
project.
your
Isaac School project.
Jake, I'm gonna kick your ass, dude. Your relationship with marijuana, weed. I know you're not really supposed to call it marijuana. That's actually a good place to start. I do want to have you take the reins if you're comfortable with that on kind of guiding us through some of this history and stuff like that. So maybe get us started. Explain your relationship to weed?
Sure. Happy to. I would say I first discovered cannabis in college, which I feel is very appropriate. I definitely, I'll say, like, started smoking weed, haven't stopped. But I also feel like I didn't have what many people, quote unquote, very subjective. But I feel like because I wasn't, like, introduced to weed in high school, really didn't even, like, have any concept of marijuana or culture. And I typically call it weed, cannabis. I know you were talking about marijuana is, like, a less than PC term these days. But
Right.
I think that there's a lot of, like, cannabis culture we can, like, dive into. It's
Oh, yeah.
very nuanced, right? All drug use, very nuanced. But I would say like the first time that I remember seeing cannabis mentioned like in media, I was watching Bill Cosby himself, that stand-up. Are you guys familiar with that one?
No, I've never actually ever watched a Bill Cosby
I'm
stand
going to
up.
say, is Bill Cosby blacklisted? We can't reference him.
You could definitely reference him. I thought you were making a joke. Like, have you guys heard of Bill Cosby? I'm like, yeah, I heard of Bill Cosby.
Bill Cosby, he was in the news a couple years ago. I don't know if you heard about him before that.
No, I only know Bill Cosby from the what kids are crazy show or whatever.
Yeah. No, Fat Albert. No, you guys.
I guess
know
okay, Fat Albert.
The
Yeah.
Cosby sweaters. I didn't watch like the Cosby Show growing up, but I did. I watched that stand-up special probably when I was like 10 years old, right? And he just does a whole bit about like how silly it is, like the concept of smoking weed, right? You all sit in a circle, you all pass a little cigarette to each other, you are all coughing, like drool coming out of your face, snot running down your nose, and it's like, yeah, everybody's really excited to have this exact same experience.
They're
you
very
know?
stoked for that.
Yeah, so that was mine, but I would say like I was also like referred to as having like a stoner type personality before again I ever had weed like in my social circles, and so I definitely think that like I'm excited to get into it with you guys about how you think like cannabis is like a stereotyped in media, right?
Yeah.
And like how cannabis culture is prevalent and how it's changed through the years. I
Oh,
think
for
that's
sure.
really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think that for me, my introduction, the first, I guess to kind of preface this, I am not a big smoker. I don't have a very good relationship with weed, I would say. I feel like when I was first introduced to it, the first time I had ever smoked or whatever, I was definitely like very worried. I was so concerned about getting. I like remember the first time I ever smoked weed, I took off my shirt because I didn't want to smell like weed. I just did not. We were out in the forest behind my house, and I did not want to smell like weed. And I was also
That is so funny.
so paranoid that I was gonna get a boner. And I don't know why. I was so concerned about that. Like I was just like, oh God. I just didn't want that to happen, and it was horrible. But the experience itself was like fine. It was whatever. And I had a good time. I actually like for a few years.
Did you get a boner?
I didn't know, thankfully. To my relief, I did not.
Good.
I did not.
Good.
No. But at least I don't think so. Jesus.
Sorry.
But and then for the next couple of years after that, like whenever we would kind of occasionally partake in or whatever, I almost always was having a good time. And then something just kind of flipped in my head at one point, and I have just kind of since been chronically like paranoid. I get really bad auditory issues where I can just like hear like any like dense thud, just like, oh my God, my heart immediately starts going like pounding, just like, what is that noise? Like,
Right.
And I don't have a super great, I would like it's one of those things that I'm like, man, and I know that it's not for everybody or whatever, but there are definitely times where I'm like, it's 0 calories to smoke weed, and it sure isn't 0 calories to drink alcohol.
That is the truth.
That's
brother.
for sure. As far as like my first time probably being exposed to it in the media, I would say that it's probably That 70s Show. And
Classic.
it's very, I mean, you can tell what they're doing or whatever, but it's like when they do those like little circles where they're all kind of smoking together. That's probably one of the earliest like references to weed in media that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah.
What about you, sir?
So I also have a pretty generally unfortunate relationship with weed. I guess for me, as far as first exposure goes, I have a hard time remembering when I really saw it in media for the first time. But I did grow up in a mostly like weed positive sort of environment.
Okay.
Maybe even that's kind of a stretch. I mostly just grew up in an environment where I was like surrounded by it a little bit. Like my family members would do it and they just wouldn't really talk about it.
Right.
And so I was just kind of like, all right, I don't know whatever that is.
Right.
I'm familiar with what that is, but I don't know anything about it. But the first time I smoked weed was in a car, and you were in it with me.
Really? I was there. Was it the Apple?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
First time I did it was out of an Apple in a very cold car, and I'm pretty sure I didn't get high, and I remember being fucking terrified. So scared.
Yeah, I remember that was a bad night for a couple people.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But it was like, it was either just a time we were all hanging out or it was after like a dance.
Yeah, I think it was. It was late because I remember we went back to
Chaz's house
and played Call of Duty.
Yeah, I remember that also. But yeah, we it was out of an Apple, and yeah, I remember it was the first time I did it, and I remember everybody around me had done it before, so I was the only person who was like unfamiliar, and I was like, yeah, I'm cool with this, but my heart was like, and I was like, oh my God, this is crazy.
Kind of like weed. Oh, do so much weed. I totally know weed.
I eat so much of it all the time.
Yeah.
Just pounds of it, just handfuls.
Yeah.
Can't get enough of that weed.
Yeah.
Did that, maybe got high. I don't even remember. I don't think I did. But that was my first brush with it. But a little while after that, I had actually a really positive experience with it.
Especially when we were at the other house.
Yeah. That's another time too. But even before that, when I was like 16, 17, there'd be a time where my mom would go on trips with her friends and stuff during the weekends. And she'd be like, here, your house is yours. I was like, all right, cool. And every weekend, Ethan and Chaz would come over and we would just get ripped. We'd get absolutely ripped.
That was the first time I drank alcohol too at your house.
How old are you guys around when this is happening?
16, 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
16,
Just a couple
17.
nice young kids then.
Yeah. And I remember the go-to bit back then was like, I vividly remember there's a time where one of us pretended made a joke that we dropped the pipe over the balcony and it landed in the balcony underneath us.
I wasn't there for that, but I remember hearing about that.
You gotta be kidding me. And I'm just so high and freaked out already. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that. What are we gonna do? Yeah, just constantly that, but it was so much fun. It was so.
Were you guys
fun.
really paranoid about getting caught, like
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
cops, by your parents?
I
Constantly.
had
getting ratted on
Yeah.
by neighbors.
I had the situation itself has then been like, I've already discussed this with my mom. She is fully aware of the situation and everything. But when we were living at our old house, my mom and my stepdad were our landlords.
Mhm.
And we were good kids. We were good kids back then, I feel like. And one time we had some people over. I think we only had one person over, but we just had so many people living at the house that it always felt like we were having a party because there was always like 6 cars in the driveway.
Yeah, but most of them were ours.
Most of them were ours. We just had 6 people living there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had a kid over with us, and I think all 7 of us had smoked. And we were downstairs, and my mom texted me, and she was on her way. Do you remember that?
God, yeah, I do remember.
And we were all hiding in Chaz's room, and it was terrible.
Yeah,
like I was
I remember
literally
that.
like high out of my mind, like, oh my fucking God. Like,
Mhm.
and I was just like on the phone. And she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, sorry. Like I didn't know." And then I was like, "I'm coming up right now." And then I got outside, and they had. Well, actually, we were originally freaked out because we just saw them sitting in the driveway,
Yeah, really.
and we didn't know who it was.
Mhm.
And I was like, that was freaking me out alone because I was like, why is a car just sitting in our driveway with their headlights on?
Sure.
I was like, it's not a cop because they would have knocked on the door by now.
Mhm.
So then I'm immediately like, it's a killer. It's a killer messing with us.
I think
Like, I can't believe I'm gonna have to defend my life while I'm so high.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I've had multiple experiences. One of them is specifically Jake's fault.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh my
I still
God.
feel bad about that,
One time,
but it was kind of funny.
me and Callista had, I don't know, maybe I should be bleeping names. I don't know if I'm giving out everyone else's business on this or anything.
Well, none of this is true. So.
That's true.
That's right.
That's true. One time, me and my girlfriend of 7 years smoked, and it was just us. We were at the house by ourselves. And I had texted Jake right when we first smoked to be like, "Hey, did you still want to hang out tonight?" Or you were like asking if we could hang out, and I had told you what we were doing, and I was like, "But if you still want to come over, like that'd be cool and everything, right?"
Mhm.
And I remember texting Jake being like, "Will you go to McDonald's and like get some food for us because we just smoked, we're not gonna be able to leave or anything?" And you were like, "Yeah, sure." And then I do remember texting you like 2 minutes later and being like, "What's your ETA?" And you were like, "It's been 2 minutes." Like, and that was really funny. But then me and Callista just went downstairs and like we're just like hanging out. Like I had forgotten completely that we had ordered food, forgot that Jake was on his way. And then all of a sudden I just hear, I can't remember if you knocked or if you just walked in.
For context, I did not know you guys were high.
Oh, you didn't know we were
I
high.
did not know that.
He did not know we were high. So then I just hear footsteps upstairs. And I'm like, and me and Callista both immediately just freeze. And I'm like, it's okay, stop. And I'm just like listening. And I'm like, what is that? And then I'm like, okay, here we go. There's definitely someone in the house. Like, and at first I'm like, shit, my parents came home early. Fuck, I don't know what to do. So I'm like, sneak up the stairs, and then I can like hear you mumbling or grumbling or something. And then he's like around the corner in the hallway, and I'm like at the top of the stairwell across the kitchen. And I think I brought up a pool cue, but not even a full pool cue. It was like a mini pool table pool. So it's like this long.
Mhm.
It's the only weapon I could find. And then
You're like, I'll just get him right through the eye.
yeah, I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do. And then I'm like, hello? Like, I'm like, is someone there? And then I'm like getting a little bit mad. I'm trying to put on my tough guy act or whatever. And then Jake sticks his hand out and he's just going like this. And at this point I was like, oh my fucking God. And like in my head right now, I'm just like, okay, a burglar's in my house, and not only is he not worried about being caught, he's fucking with me. There's something about a killer fucking with me that is like my worst nightmare.
Mhm.
So I'm like, God damn it. I gotta protect Callista. I gotta do something. And then I remember like yelling at you.
Yeah, you put on your big man voice, and I was like, oh, he's like actually scared.
Yeah, I was like, get the fuck out of
Yeah,
here.
you're like, I don't know who the fuck you are, but you better get out here right now. Or something like that.
I was fully fronting. I was so scared. And then Jake finally sticks his head out.
And I was like, whoa, relax.
that was like, so I think that I've
It's a good
probably been
thing-
internalized to just be extremely scared while I'm high. And that's probably why I feel that
Did you guys
way.
ever have like a good time?
I definitely did. I definitely have had some great memories, especially at the old house. We
Yeah,
had some
there
good
was
times, for sure.
there's a very specific time when we first moved into that house where the back balcony wasn't attached to the
there
house.
was no balcony.
So we just had a back door that just dropped.
Just 50 feet in the air.
Pretty dangerous, actually. I think that's like that might be like a some
The
kind
violation.
of code violation. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember just crowding around it, sitting on the tile on the floor, and just like hearing the cars drive by at night. And there's just like, we just have the lights off except for the one in the living room. We would just pass around this pipe and just smoke it and just goof off for a little while, have snacks together and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That was near the end of
For sure, the best times.
I actually think I remember the exact turning point where I was like, I think I need to stop smoking weed.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty unfortunate one too, because it started as a pretty positive thing, but we were doing this thing where we would watch like one of us would pick a director.
Yeah.
And one that was picked was Wes Anderson. And we thought it would be just so fun. So fun to smoke weed before we watch the Wes Anderson movies, because they're kind of goofy and funny and
kind of
whatever,
whimsical,
right?
kind of stonery.
Yeah.
Bright colors.
So I smoked quite a bit before we watched the Royal Tenenbaums.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that movie at all?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so I remember just being stoned out of my mind, being terrified by a specific scene involving Luke Wilson in a bathroom. I don't want to get into it because that might be like triggering for some people or whatever, but it was not good for my high brain. I was like, this is terrible right now. I'm hating this feeling. So I feel like that was like the definitive turning point for me, where I was like, I'm not liking this feeling I'm having at all, this weird, just existentialist mindset I keep running into.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I have a lot of questions for you guys.
Oh, please.
Feel free
go
to
for
edit
it.
these out.
No.
But I am curious. Like, I feel like cannabis is definitely a tool, right? Any drug, like any drug, right? The way you slice it, I feel like some people it's a tool for them to socialize. Some people it's a tool to escape, to be distracted. I think sometimes it's a tool to rebel, or it's like a mindfulness tool. So I'm curious, like, what. I kind of want to know, like, how did you guys get introduced? Like, did you have a friend? Did you have a buddy that, like, taught you all the ways? Did you go into it blind? Like, what was your kickoff point?
For me, it was way more of, like, a social thing. Like, it was, like, this will be fun to do kind of a thing. Like, and I honestly can't really pinpoint exactly what, because even some of my, like, earlier experiences, like, where I was, like, first learning how to do stuff, like, I remember the first time being, like, way too high was probably, like, one of the first times I had smoked, and it was, like, with one of my friend's older brothers, and him and his friends, and they were like, this is gonna be really funny, so they, like, let me fucking white wall a bong.
That's
and
fucked up.
Yeah,
dude.
and, like, I was, like,
I never heard that
thought
story.
I was dying.
Yeah.
But it was
irresponsible.
yeah, and it was fine after I had calmed down. The worst part was just, like, genuinely, like, I never really got over, like, the actual pain associated with smoking. Like, the throat thing, that has... I've never been able to get over that. Like, it's terrible every time. So, I think for me diving into it, it was definitely, like, a social thing. As far as, like, later in life, I've definitely, like, tried it again in terms of, like, you know, like, for anxiety or whatever. But even with that, it's way more, like, I'll go, like, the CBD route. Like, the CBD rolls or whatever that have, like, 0.5 THC. I do like those. I don't know how much of it is just like a placebo thing, but I do like those a lot more, I think.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it was pretty similar. It was because I started using it socially.
Right.
And I think like one time after that, we bought some from somebody, I don't remember. And I was just at home and I had it and I was texting my girlfriend at the time and I was like, I kind of want to like do this and just like try it. And she was like, go for it. And so I just went out on my balcony that day and just like smoked some of it. And I remember just feeling really weird. Like I was like, I don't know. I'm still not super familiar with what this is.
Sure.
I should probably just only do this when I'm with somebody so it's fun or whatever. So pretty much ever since then, I don't remember any time I just did it just to do it. Like when I was alone or whatever. Okay. But yeah, I remember actually a couple times since that point where I was like, all right, I think this isn't good for me. Where I had tried to do it and I had like just very different responses each time. One that stands out a lot in my brain is, it sounds kind of silly, but it was when we went to Seattle together and we got some edibles. And I was like, I'm going to try this. And then so I took one and I remember we were all going to sleep and my heart was just beating really fast.
I remember that. Yeah.
And then I remember Ethan was in the bed behind me from where I was facing. So I was looking this way, but the light from his phone was projecting on the like ceiling, just like out, like just in my peripheral and just the like the shadows of his fingers on the wall. I was like, what the fuck is that? And I was so scared to turn around. I was like, I don't know what that is, but I'm not going to fucking look at it. And then eventually, like, I was just like, I need to face whatever this is. And I turned around and I was like, it's just Ethan on his phone. Never mind.
Right.
And then I remember being like, why am I doing this? I need to
Yeah.
not do this anymore.
What about you? What was your what was your kind of perception, or at least your perception of it now?
Sure. I mean, as you guys have been talking, I think you've had very quintessential like cannabis experiences, weed experiences. I love hearing that. I think, I grew up in a family where it was like, this is a gateway drug, like literally not one sip, right? Not one sip of liquor. Grew up LDS. I feel like that is not, nobody's a stranger. At least, I don't know how wide your audience is, but at least in this room,
Sure.
we all have some context there. But I remember even being in like 9th grade and I was in debate class and we had to debate the legalization of cannabis. And like my teacher just had maybe, I don't know, like 2 pages of an article printed out. And I remember the first things I noticed were like, nobody has died of an overdose of this. It comes from the earth, like non-habit forming. And I was like, oh, this seems like a no-brainer. And I'm literally in 9th grade. Right?
Yeah,
And
100%.
I think that it always had an association with like burnouts, right?
Yeah.
And I think that around the time that I was interested in like experimenting with drugs in general, I was definitely feeling like a burnout. Like I was in my first couple of years of college. In fact, I had actually just moved from Logan, attending Utah State University. Hated the winter. It was like too many bootcut jeans for me. Moved back home, started going to school at the U in the city. And I just had like one close friend that was like, if you ever want to try weed, like always happy to like help you through it. And we were like best friends. It was just me and him that would smoke weed together. But same, I had my first time smoking in a car. We just like, we used to empty out Prime Times. Prime Times, they're like, they're shaped like cigarettes, but they're like great flavor. They might be illegal now.
Right, yeah.
All this
Right.
new
Like,
Utah legislation.
Sure.
But yeah, we would stuff one of those full of weed. And I remember taking like 2 puffs and he was like, don't feel bad if you don't get high the first time. Like, that's really normal. Like Jake, you just shared, you had a similar experience. Weren't sure if you got high. But I remember it was literally like, we were listening to a podcast about like hip hop history. And I was like 2 puffs in. And then I was like, oh, like can't feel my hands. I started having like full body shakes, like started sweating
I've had that
immediately.
before.
And I kind of had, I would say like really positive experience. I'll say like why cannabis is my drug of choice. It's like very silly. Am I wrong? Like it fosters a very silly environment. And I think that shows in a lot of these movies that we might talk about.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. I think that's a great segue point. And you're right. Like as far as like my biggest thing that I kind of want to preface before we move on is like, I am definitely not like against it. I'm like disappointed by my current relationship with it, just because it is one of those things that I'm like, I wish I could do it. Like and I've kind of made peace with the fact that like it's not for everybody, and like I'm totally cool with not doing it or whatever. But yeah, I definitely wish I had more net positive experiences, but I have absolutely had my share of just like ridiculously funny moments as well.
Definitely.
But that's a good segue. I think that probably the next best way to continue this is you were talking about how it has this kind of reputation, or at least it did in Utah. And it's hard to gauge where that kind of conversation is currently, just because like I feel like we as like, the 3 of us and individually and everything, I feel like we are so steep in a very specific form of like politic and opinion and everything that like it feels silly to even have to preface this kind of episode with this kind of warning or whatever. But we also do live in red Utah, and we're in Salt Lake or whatever. Well, we're not in Salt Lake right now, but we're
based
in Salt Lake for sure. Yeah. And, I do still consider the fact that like, even most Republicans, I would say, support weed, but specifically Utah, I would say I don't know that most LDS people support it and everything. Right. So as far as like the stigma and everything around it goes, I think a perfect starting place is the kind of quintessential anti-weed movie, Reefer Madness, otherwise known as Tell Your Children or something like that. I think that's the alternative name. Have you ever seen Reefer Madness?
I was preparing myself to watch Reefer Madness this week, and I actually had a friend tell me, like, save your time, read this recap, this review about Reefer Madness. But I watched probably like 30 minutes of it. It's only an hour long.
Yeah, you watched enough of it then.
Right? Yeah. Hilarious. I want to hear your thoughts first, and then I think I could summarize like my feelings about this film probably in like 2 sentences.
Okay, perfect. So, and you have not seen this film.
I've not seen it.
But are you familiar with Reefer Madness?
I'm familiar. This is like the anti-weed propaganda movie, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So, Reefer Madness, its title on Letterboxd is called Tell Your Children. 1938, Louis J. Gaznier is a French guy. early U.S. propaganda film about the dangerous effects of weed.
Public Enemy #1.
Literally, the poster is the tagline for this movie is "Women cry for it, men will die for it."
What?
Like if you're trying to persuade people to avoid something, I'm like, don't make it sound so sexy.
So fucking badass, yeah. The thing that's also really funny about Reefer Madness is just I do want to describe what the movie's about as
Kind
well.
of a sick poster.
Yeah, really cool.
Poster kind of goes hard.
So that's a good point. The reason it is like that though is because Reefer Madness kind of backfired on what it was created for. So Reefer Madness was in part funded by every source I could find just says the church. They didn't really I don't know what church
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's funded by the church. I would assume that means I feel like the only time outside of Utah you're referring to the church, it's the Catholic Church.
I would say so.
So probably the Catholic Church, I would say. It was created intended to be like a PSA kind of film. Kind of went absolutely nowhere. And then 3 years later, it was kind of discovered and was repurposed intentionally in the exploitation genre.
Right.
And like has kind of ebbed and flowed since then. And then in the 70s is where it really picked up as like a cult film. And has just ever since then, it's mainly a movie to smoke weed and watch. Like, so as far as it being effective propaganda, I would say it did not work. It didn't really go anywhere. I do want to find this opening crawl and read it to you guys to give you some indication of how this sums up basically the ethos of the entire movie. So here we go. The opening crawl is the incidents and characters portrayed in this motion picture are purely fictional and any similarity, blah, 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 blah. That's all the normal stuff, right? This motion picture you are about to witness may startle you. It would not have been possible otherwise to sufficiently emphasize the frightful toll of the new drug menace which is destroying the youth of America in alarmingly increasing numbers. Marijuana is that drug, a violent narcotic, an unspeakable scourge, the real public enemy #1. Its first effect is sudden, violent, uncontrollable laughter. Then come dangerous hallucinations, space expands, time slows down, almost stands still. Fixed ideas come next, conjuring up monstrous extravagances. Followed by emotional disturbances, the total inability to direct thoughts, the loss of all power to resist physical emotions, leading finally to acts of shocking violence, ending often in incurable insanity. In picturing its soul-destroying effects, no attempt was made to equivocate. The scenes and incidents, while fictionized for the purposes of this story, are based upon actual research into the results of marijuana addiction. If their stark reality will make you aware that something must be done to wipe out this ghastly menace, then the picture will not have failed in its purpose, because the dread marijuana may be reaching forth next for your son, or your daughter, or yours, or yours.
Quite a writer they got behind that one, because honestly, bravo. Well worded.
Wow.
Very well worded. Intense.
You think they're talking about the goddamn the Fourth Reich in that paragraph. They are just, yeah, it is. And I think that basically sums up the movie. The movie itself is like a just continuous series of like these, they're almost like zombies. Like they're like just like they smoke weed and like they will just like they just fucking lose their minds. Like and like they just like, and it's also just really, it's the one key part of the movie that I wanted to specifically call out is a main trick in this movie that tricks these poor white kids into smoking weed, right? Is that they think they're just smoking a harmless little cigarette. Like, and that happens multiple times where they're like, you want to smoke? And they're like, yeah, sure. And they're like smoking a cigarette. And then it's, no, that's no cigarette. And that itself was like, okay, that's like all you really need to see. Like the fact that this is coming from a time where that's totally fine. No health concerns about that.
Pretty dubious.
Absolutely. But yeah, that is the, I would say, start of kind of the anti-weed crusade in American film.
Was this the 50s that this came out?
No, 1938, I believe.
Holy hell.
Yeah, 1938. I think it was filmed in 1935.
Okay, so funny because they were definitely like drinking cocaine and like in their soda.
Exactly. So
being prescribed heroin for their period pain.
and I think one of the most hilarious parts about watching this movie, for me at least, like eye-opening, maybe not even eye-opening, but just kind of like an interesting juxtaposition to make with it or whatever, is that like and I'm sure we'll talk about this later on in this episode and everything, but like you really can't separate this crusade against weed from just like anti-black legislation, period. And like everyone in this movie is white, but that has way more to do with the fact that it was just made in 1938 and they'd rather be dead than have a black person in this movie. But if they could, they absolutely, all these drug dealers, you know, and that just, I think that is like such a funny part of it because they are talking with such genuine conviction and like fully faced, like just bold-faced lies, like absolute lies. And I think the funniest part of it is that like it's kind of naive to assume that propaganda itself doesn't really exist anymore. And it definitely still does. And it might not be just as bold, but it is just funny to be like, they're still just lying about shit, certain things, especially in terms of like drugs and stuff like that, I would say. So that was what, I mean, it's a terrible movie. It's definitely probably a classic movie to watch while you're high. It probably would be very fun to watch at like the Tower, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, really bad movie, but it was like a classic for me to like kind of check off my film list that I had finally watched Reefer Madness. That was my kind of experience with it, was just that, you know, and I couldn't really find too many more similar in this vein. I would say this kind of speaks for all of this kind of basically pre-1970 anti-weed propaganda.
It is pretty funny too to think, because if in the 30s, right? And this might be naive of me to say, but like, how are you supposed to do research on that? Like realistically, it's just like
literally you don't.
Do you see? Tell your children, dude, weed is crazy.
It's nuts.
Oh
dude.
my god, I can't believe that happened.
And just
that was nuts.
You're just like, and like they just, it's going to make you kill somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Because yeah, that's how you get information.
Yeah,
newspaper says it.
In the movies,
store owner down the trail said something.
Absolutely.
About how weed is a devil's lettuce.
It's a devil's lettuce for sure.
And I think, you know, you're only a few years removed from like the prohibition conversation.
Absolutely.
Right. And I feel like women particularly were like so prohibition because they wanted to stop getting like beaten half to death by their drunk husbands. Right.
Yep.
And so I think, you know, instead of making that conversation about don't beat your wives, it became about like, let's all stop drinking. Right.
Right.
And so I think you can always like point scapegoats out when the conversation of the war on drugs is raised, because exactly, you've already said, like, cigarettes are still easier to access than cannabis, even where it's legalized, right? It's expensive. You might have to get like a medical card. And at the end of the day, like, so many more people are dying of lung cancer.
For sure.
Are dying of a cannabis psychosis event. Right?
And it's not that I'm not saying like, and so therefore we also need to outlaw cigarettes. It is just hilarious to kind of see like them so blatantly be like, well, that was totally fine. Another interesting thing that I had actually read somewhere else that was kind of really like, speaking of like the scapegoat thing, is like, this came out in 1938. So this is like, you know, post Roaring 20s, like dead thick of the Great Depression, where like, you know, people, especially like in this early 20th century America, where kind of the first major catastrophe of American capitalism is affecting the entire country, and people are like, what the fuck is going on? And it's like, well, you always need something to blame in all. It's never capitalism. It's never the system's fault. So in the 30s, okay, well, what are the black people doing? Like, they're smoking weed. So, okay, it's weed. It's weed's fault. Like, that is really, truly what's destroying this country right now, is just drug rampant. It's also hilarious because I would love to see what the numbers are in terms of like how many Americans were smoking weed in the 30s. Like, I'm like, where were you possibly getting weed? Like, exactly. I'm sure that number has steadily gone up. But yeah, that was the scapegoat thing. Thank you for reminding me about that.
No,
so
100%. What
was your 2-second summary of the Reefer Madness?
So I think first of all, you've touched on so many good points, especially about like putting it in context. Because like the very first thing I noticed in watching a few minutes of this film are these actors that are supposed to be teenagers are truly like 30 years old, like obviously shell-shocked post-war.
That's so fucked up.
100%.
I think, you know, just like you said, like it truly backfired as like an anti-weed propaganda. And maybe not, right? Like maybe it had a similar effect as like, you know, how weed was tied with Satanism, like further on in like the 70s and the 80s.
Right.
But I'm like, even if you just watch the trailer for this film, the premise is, if you smoke weed, you are going to be instantly cooler. You are going to get laid, and people are going to think you're more interesting.
That That is so true too, because one of the things that stuck out to me the most is like there's a scene where this guy and this girl smoke weed and then they're like kind of making out on the couch, and I was like, it is very strange to see actual 1930s people getting like this, like just because like, I mean, people were having sex and doing stuff like that back then, but like whenever you think about them just being like, oh, Jimmy, what are you doing today? Like you just really can't imagine them getting into it. And so watching them do that, I was like, wow, that is really weird. And you're totally right. I feel like if I was some fucking kid who just dodge drafted World War I and was watching this movie, I'd be like, I should smoke weed. That looks fucking awesome.
That's exactly how I felt.
Yeah, exactly. So
I bet 30s sex was stinky.
Oh,
they
you've
had
got
soap.
8 layers of like petticoats
and just vests and wool and all that. That's true. I guess that's a good point.
Just got back from the coal mine.
Yeah.
Covered in soot.
But I do think that in terms of, I think it's also just funny. This movie has definitely had a lasting effect. It's definitely a part of like the American lexicon of pop culture and everything. They made a 2006, I think, musical version of this. That's a parody of it, but apparently that's supposed to be really fun. I haven't seen that, but yeah. But yeah, the next kind of, I think, evolution in this, and we're going to take a significant time jump here, is truly, I would almost consider our modern era of comedies, comedies, of weed movies specifically, though, is like, I think Reefer Madness kind of shows this early era, and then I'm sure weed pops up, through the years in film as a plot device in terms of like negative things, especially shows like Law and Order, stuff like that. But in terms of like where we really have it in the center as a focus of a show is definitely like our modern age of just the stoner comedy.
Sure.
I would say. Can you think of any other really like negative connotation representations in media?
I mean, I think that at times when you're talking about like cannabis in film, it's kind of hard to separate it from like drugs in film.
Exactly.
Not
just
always,
in general. But
I think cannabis specifically gets like lumped in with other drugs. There's a rhetoric that it's like a gateway drug, etc. But I definitely, even in my mind, as you're talking about like our modern like stoner film, quote unquote, I think that there's kind of a marked difference between like the 90s, right? I think like Cheech and Chong, I think like Bill and Ted's, even though they aren't like on film smoking. And then I think of like almost like a second Seth Rogen wave of like weed culture, right? Where you're also doing Molly at the same time. Like you're having conversations about like acid and shrooms, right?
Yep, I would agree. I feel like that's a good way to look at it, where like with the Cheech and Chong, I would say that is probably like the next earliest, closest to Reefer Madness, like ushering in. And even with those I feel like the Cheech and Chong movies were, I guess the way I would distinguish between those two waves are, those would still be kind of like, maybe not underground or even indie movies, but like you wouldn't see a lot of people going to watch that. That seems like a secondary market type of movie, a very DVD or VHS, I guess, driven. No, I guess when Cheech and Chong was coming out, they wouldn't even really had that. But yeah, that's kind of how I would see it. As whereas like when you get to Pineapple Express and stuff like that, it's like I feel like I remember watching that movie in theaters.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Like, and that's just weird. Like that's weird that I saw that in a movie theater
before you had ever smoked weed.
I was 11 years old.
Oh, okay.
I was a baby when I saw that movie.
Yeah.
I probably went and saw it with my mom for some reason.
Like, I'll be honest, like I do not really relate with like stoner media, and I think maybe that's something we'll get into, is just kind of like how we already kind of touched on it, right? Like how people that are stereotyped as like weed smokers are portrayed in Hollywood. And I'll be honest, I don't think Hollywood has always gotten it right, and I specifically think it has been like very like male centered.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Honestly, I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like one thing that through all of this that I have kind of noticed watching all of these is like, what's the one with Anna Faris and John Krasinski?
Smiley Face.
Smiley Face it was actually recommended to me by Sophie, and I had never heard of it before then. And I was like, oh, I got to check that out. And I didn't have time, unfortunately, to watch it before this episode, but everything else that I had been watching this week, you're 100% right, is very male-centered. And unfortunately, I think the other big part of that is my biggest gripe with basically every stoner movie that I watched is that, like, they're all pretty misogynistic still. Like, they're all pretty funny up until a certain point where basically anytime there's like a woman in it, it's like, ugh, like
does not pass the Bechdel test.
Yeah, no, God no, like not even out of the question. But yeah, that's actually a really good point. And Smiley Face is the one movie that I can think of where I know there was that TV show Weeds.
Oh yeah,
where the main character But
A white woman main character.
yeah, that's true too. But Smiley Face is like the first movie that I can think of that where it wasn't like, especially a duo, like a buddy duo of weed smokers. That's another big stoner trope. Is just like the two stoners for sure. That's a big one.
I say it holds up, right? Like that was my experience.
That's
I had
true.
like my one guide, and I don't know if this is like an appropriate time to bring this in, but I was listening to your guys' episode last week, and you were talking about The Godfather and the exchange that you had with the older man, the older identifying man in the bathroom. But you said something that was so poignant, and that's been on my mind. As I've been thinking about like stoner films, like the concept of even 420, right? Like how it's been communicated. And you said that it's great how these films can be like introduced by a new generation, or how they like mean a new thing to each new generation, right? It's great to see it discovered by a new generation. And I think you can say the exact same thing with weed smoking, right? Like weed is a social lubricant. A lot of times it is a common denominator, it's an equalizer. It really does. Like you can sit down with anybody any age and you're like, oh, you smoke weed? We have one thing in common.
Perfect.
Right?
Yeah, that's all we need.
A great kicking off point. Yeah, we don't have to agree on everything. We don't even have to agree on how to smoke this weed.
Yeah.
We can agree that we like it. And I think you said yourself, right? Like political sides of the spectrum can usually agree on weed. Now, whether that is manifested in actual politics, like
right,
is a different story.
Exactly. And honestly, I think that's like a good, like, maybe segue into some of these like movies specifically is like in like Pineapple Express. We'll talk about Pineapple Express for a minute. The legality of weed is a plot device in a lot of these movies, and I do think it's used effectively to a point that's like it's like the driver of a lot of the comedy in a lot of these movies is just I can't think of one stoner movie that I watched where there's not a part where they almost get caught smoking weed and they're like, I gotta fucking throw it out, like, you gotta get rid of the weed or whatever. Even Big Lebowski, I feel like he's probably the most nonchalant about it. But talk about Pineapple Express. You rewatched Pineapple Express this week.
I did, yeah. It's interesting to watch this movie as like an adult, because last time I really did watch this movie was definitely in like my preteen hood, I guess, right? And I remember back then I was like, oh, this is such a raunchy, funny movie. This is crazy. This is just like what weed smoking is like, right? But now as an adult who has partook, right? It's especially funny to watch because one thing I do think this movie gets right, and then I wish more stoner movies would capitalize on more. A lot of them do, but this one does it a lot. Is like they're smoking a lot of weed all the time.
Oh my God, I know. Even Dazed and Confused, I was like, you guys are smoking all fucking night long.
I know.
What are you doing?
I know. And I kind of love that because it just reminds you like, oh yeah, these guys are high and they're getting into just crazy shenanigans while they're high. And I think Pineapple Express is also just one of the more entertaining ones just because like the stoner adventure is there, right? Like it's just so absurd and like just so all over the place, and it's made even more chaotic because the characters are high and so they're not really thinking straight and they're just getting into goofy situations. Like one of the ones that's really fucking funny to me is when they're in the forest and they're like, we gotta break our phones. So Seth Rogen smashes his phone on a rock and James Franco throws his in the woods and he's like, why the fuck did you do that? And then he's like, we'll call it really quick. He's like, my phone is smashed. Like just stupid shit like that is so funny to me. But yeah, I still like that movie, I'd say.
Yeah, a specific moment for me that was like I will say all of these movies, even the ones that I pretty much gave most of the movies I watched this week a 6. The only two that I really actually enjoyed were Dazed and Confused is pretty good, and Big Lebowski I think is like a classic.
Amazing. But
like I watched the Harold and Kumar movies, or at least the first two, and I meant to watch Friday, didn't get around to it, but I watched Pineapple Express, and they were definitely like 6s for me. But I did laugh out loud to all of them by myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the funniest part to me in Pineapple Express is when they fall asleep in the car, and then they wake up. They have like a conversation about how they've been sleeping for a really long time, and then James Franco's like, let's get out of here, man. I'm sick of the woods. Let's go. And then Seth Rogen tries to turn on the car. He can't turn it on because the battery's dead. And he's like, well, I can't because the battery's dead. And then James Franco's face, you can just like tell that he's trying so hard not to break character. He's just like, wait, what do you mean the battery's dead? And then Seth Rogen is like, the battery's dead. And then he's just like, what do you mean? And he's like, I don't know how else to explain this to you. It is dead. The battery's dead. And I was laughing my fucking ass off. Specifically talking about how they're male focused and just like kind of how some of them are still problematic. Pineapple Express specifically
easily the worst about that.
has this one plot device that I was just like, why did they do this? where Seth Rogen is just dating a high school girl. And I was like, listen, I might have been 11 years old in 2008, but I'm pretty sure that was still weird.
That's a great way to put it.
That was like so strange to me that they did that.
Yeah, I'm still pretty lost on it because like if you really want to watch it and like not be bothered by that or want to associate any kind of reason of that, you could be like, well, I guess Seth Rogen's character is kind of a loser, but I'm like, you can still paint the character that way without doing that, though, you know what I mean?
Which I still think kind of falls back onto those stereotypes that you were talking about, where the modern stereotype of the stoner is that they are kind of like, you know, they are a drag on society. They're lovable losers, though.
Yeah.
They're like, yep, they are not functioning members of society. And I still think that, like, while that's maybe a step in the better direction, I would still say that's definitely a very inaccurate representation of weed smokers.
Definitely.
I think, you know, especially today, I'm like, dispensaries are like Apple stores.
Yeah.
Like, we've got executives that are hitting their like high-tech vape pens, you know, between meetings.
The goddamn president and the vice president are talking about how they, well, I don't know about Joe Biden specifically, but, you know, Kamala Harris is talking about, like, oh, yeah, I smoked weed back in high school. And it's like, yeah, you have people in positions of power talking about how they smoke weed. I don't know how many people are probably fucking writing code while they're high as shit. Like, I just feel like it's way less of an actual, like, especially like older generations of people who don't smoke. I do feel like there's still this stigma of just like, you smoke weed and you are just like the girl who's flat in her chair. Kind of a thing. Like
in like the Truth commercial.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, yeah, sure, you can probably get so high that you feel the need to do that. But I would say that like 90% of people are not smoking weed that way.
Oh, right.
You ever see a stoner creatively try to find a new way to get high?
Oh, right.
You could have a goddamn engineering degree.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No.
I was going to bring up how even in Pineapple Express, you kind of see some of that stuff, like with the cross joint.
Yeah,
and just stupid shit like that. But it's also like, that's kind of clever.
And the fact that I have seen that replicated in real life now is pretty funny.
I lit one of those for somebody one time.
Wow, nice.
See, and I think that's where like there really is like a casual, right, like weed smoker.
Yeah.
And then there's like weed culture.
Exactly.
And I feel like that manifests in all different ways. I think, gosh, like look at Seth Rogen now, who I will say, like some of my favorite movies that have cannabis at the center, Seth Rogen is behind them all.
Yeah.
Like, kudos to him. And even now where he's building like, you know, homewares that are all centered around like smoking weed. I think that's a positive. But it shows that I think, you can smoke weed and be successful, which I don't want to erase the fact that like, of course, comedians have been smoking weed forever. Like, of course, creative people have been smoking weed
and have
forever.
had kind of the freedom to do so a little bit more.
Exactly.
Right.
We're talking like specifically about how it's portrayed in media, and something else that I think is so funny as we're talking about really like any movie 1990 and before. Like think of Reefer Madness in the 1930s. The weed that they were smoking was probably like literal hay that they picked out of the backyard, and like the weed that we're smoking so casually today is like military grade, like psychological warfare.
American ultra weed.
Oh, Ted. Have you guys seen Ted? With,
Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah. So funny. I just watched the scene today where they're going over, I think another really funny thing is like strain names.
Yeah.
And that's something that is much more centered, I would say, like lately, because weed is like it's such like a craft experience, right? And it is so curated. And yeah, that scene, I think I have it written down somewhere, but he's like, this strain is called Mind Rape. The other options were They're Coming, and the last one is just called This Is Permanent. I'm like, if that doesn't perfectly summarize like how strong this goddamn
some of this
weed
is
that we're smoking is.
Yeah. I think that's like a really good point too, in just terms of like how they are. I saw a joke that someone was kind of making that like, you know, it's really funny to how weed has kind of gotten, maybe not necessarily in its media portrayal, but just in terms of its cultural implications, where like weed snobs is kind of like a thing you probably wouldn't have had 10, 15 years ago. Sure. But like the fact that you can kind of make fun of some, like the same way that you, and maybe that's like a rude way to put it or whatever, but like, you know, the characterization or caricature of a person being like, oh, this wine is like, oh, and like, you're like, what are you talking about, dude? It's fucking wine. But like, there is absolutely that of weed smokers, you know, 100%. That are just like, oh, this, like, I only smoke the finest, like Alps bud. That's it. That's, you know, and
it is kind of funny, the juxtaposition from that to like wine tasting and stuff too, because there's a lot of similarities. They're like, smell it.
Yeah. Like, and it's a very fragrant and aromatic. And I will say some of the best weed I have ever had was when I was in San Diego. I got my medical license while I was there, got it delivered to me at our Airbnb, didn't have a pipe, and our host was like, yeah, you can use my pipe. And the weed that we got was like a blueberry thing, and that's the only time I've ever genuinely been like, this smells fucking good. Like, because usually when I smell weed, I'm like, it stinks, like I can smell it.
That's sure weed.
Yeah, exactly. It's not smelly, but that's the only time I've ever been like, oh, this actually smells pretty good.
Yeah, I would say like I've definitely had like peaks and valleys of how much I care about what I'm smoking.
Right.
And then I honestly feel like the more weed that I smoked in life, the more I was like, guaranteed nobody has any idea like where this strain of weed came from. I think you get people that are so particular about, well, I only smoke like a 34.5% sativa so that I get like the perfect combination of creativity and relaxation. I'm like, oh my God, just like do your headspace meditation.
Right.
Like,
yeah. Just what are you
take
talking
a deep breath. I know, but to each their own.
Yeah, exactly. You do what you do. Do what you want to do. And it is genuinely also just I personally would not mind to have significantly less strong weed.
Oh, tell me about it.
I'm someone who's, whenever people talk about like, oh man, the weed the kids are smoking nowadays nothing or is crazy compared to what I'm like, well, give me some of what you guys are smoking because god damn, I don't like it.
Give me some of that geezer weed.
Yeah, exactly. I want something that's gonna make me be like, whoa, I feel like I just took one hit off of a cigarette. That's the high I'm chasing. It's just that.
Yeah.
I also rewatched the Harold and Kumar movies.
Right.
Those ones put this whole thing into an interesting perspective for me because I do think they carry a lot of the same baggage that some of these other stoner comedies carry, but the two leads being not white guys definitely also helped.
Absolutely.
And I was like, that was like a really interesting perspective. And a lot of the comedy is centered around that, which was like a really interesting thing to kind of laugh at because it was like, they're like racist jokes, but they're not at the expense of those characters, I guess I would say. Like the people saying the jokes are the butt of the joke. For example, in Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay. First of all, pretty ballsy movie to release it at the time that it came out. And there's the whole plot. Have you seen either of those movies?
I've seen both of them, yeah.
The premise of that one is that they're on the airplane going to Amsterdam. And there's a part where Kumar, who is Indian, is just laughing. And there's this old white lady behind him. And she just keeps getting fucking freaked out. And then it finally shows what she's seeing. And she just sees him in like this turban and like a big long beard. And he's just like laughing and like making plane going down gestures.
Oh my God.
And then he makes a smokeless bong that looks like a bomb, and then everybody sees it and he's like, it's a bong, and they're like, he's got a bong. And it's really fucking funny. But then a little bit later in the movie there's like this really souped up kind of like America, like hell yeah, federal FBI agent, I guess, who's like hunting them down, and he's asking a question about Harold and Kumar, and he's asking why Harold's eyes look like that. And it's really bad. And he says like, oh, he's just Korean, like he's of Korean descent. And then the guy goes, he's like, North Korea and Al Qaeda working together, like I never knew it would go this far. And it's like, it was so fucking bad, but it was funny just because I'm like, obviously these guys are writing the jokes, like it's and they're making fun of this fucking guy, like he's supposed to be this kind of stereotypical American, federal agent. But yeah, those movies I feel like were the same thing. They were really funny. They had a lot of parts that I was like, Jesus Christ, this is just not good. But the weed, particularly in those movies, I feel like is a pretty healthy, like they love it and they are productive. Like they're like, Harold is like a really smart computer programmer and Kumar is like a fucking doctor. Yeah,
that's right.
And it's even funnier because he doesn't want to be a doctor. Like the opening scene is him like doing like an interview for it, and the guy's like, you're one of the best candidates I've ever had, and he's just like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then like starts taking a phone call, and he's asking him like, what do you really think I'm gonna hire you now? And he's like, I don't really want to be hired. And he's like, why? You're so good. And he's like, just because you're hung like a horse doesn't mean you got to do porn. Like, so I feel like on multiple fronts, while it still has its problems, I did appreciate that one for kind of pushing back on the unproductive member of society stereotype. They're definitely stoner potheads, but they are very productive members of society. Sure. And that was really hilarious.
I think if you don't mind, if you don't have anything else to say about it, do you guys have any comments on those movies you want to talk about?
One last thing about Harold and Kumar that I really appreciate. I don't remember. I watched some clips on YouTube and I don't remember, but there's a scene where Kumar is like having this fantasy about his relationship with weed. And it's him like going through this whole pretty much
fake
like
relationship.
Yeah, like with this bag of weed to the point where he's even like there's a domestic violence incident at the end of this fantasy with the weed. But I think that's something that I related to, because you're right. It's like at the end of the day, like smoking weed, I think it's really easy to adopt it as like a personality point. But everybody really does have their own like motivations for doing drugs or drinking alcohol. And I think that's something that's also well portrayed in Dazed and Confused. So I don't know if that's where you were segueing to, Jake.
I wasn't, but let's take it to Dazed and Confused.
I actually am really glad. I do want to touch on Dazed and Confused because that's that is a key movie. The biggest thing, I'll keep it short for my thing about Dazed and Confused, is that movie is just pure vibes, like the movie. And its portrayal of weed is kind of secondary. It's not secondary. It's like first and foremost of what's happening, but like it's not really trying to make a statement to me on like the stoners themselves. It's just way more being like, these kids are just smoking weed and having a good time, and this is just how that was. And here you go. Here's just like fly on the wall perspective of it. And I really like that like interpretation of it. What's like, how do you feel about Dazed and Confused?
Absolutely. I listened to an interview. I don't remember if it's like, I feel like Jack London can't be right. The main actor who plays Pink Floyd.
Yeah, I have no idea. He has like been in nothing else. I'll look up his name, but go ahead.
And you know what? Maybe you can edit out this silence, but let me see. I'm sure I wrote it down.
I was gonna say he is Jason London. You were right.
Yeah, Jason London. That's right. So in this interview, he's talking about how like he recognized that it is kind of categorized as a weed movie, because honestly, it was like one of the first movies where there was so much like blatant cannabis use in there. But he's like, he doesn't like to view it as like a weed movie or a stoner movie. He's like, this is just a really good representation of like how kids were growing up in this time. And yeah, the weed is kind of it's not the plot device, but it is like the characters are the center, right? And the characters happen to smoke weed. And I would say like that has pretty, in my experience, like a really true to life like the characters in their relationship with weed, where it's like a lot of them are not underachievers. There's definitely like a good diverse like group of abilities in this main cast, and there's also like a lot of fucking characters in that movie. Like I cannot keep them all straight, but I think that they are just like hanging out in their room, right? Like with school. One of them is an athlete, and I think that it shows how weed can kind of be almost like this dog whistle of just like being a contrarian. To your point, like it doesn't mean that you are an underachiever.
Right.
I think it's a good portrayal too of, it's like, I think I relate a lot with the feeling of like, I am stuck in this place. I can't advance. I might as well just make the time that I have like as fun as it can be. For
sure, right.
And like open as many opportunities to like be vulnerable with my friends or not like second guess every step that I'm taking, because I think you are so insecure as a teenager. And I think that the way that these kids are using cannabis is like that social lubricant, right?
Yeah.
And another really funny thing that he says in that same interview is that the cast smoked Austin, Texas out of weed. They could not get any more weed during their filming. They smoked much behind the scenes.
Wow. Yeah. No, I think that movie in particular, especially like what you were saying earlier about weed being a kind of social lubricant or a common denominator, I think this movie is the one that kind of shows that, like specifically because where I feel like in the Breakfast Club's kind of ethos of all these kind of different kids coming together after they like have these like hard conversations, whatever, I feel like Dazed and Confused just kind of skips that, and they're just like all talking together because they're all smoking weed together, kind of a thing. And even in terms of like some of the negative things happening in Dazed and Confused, like obviously like these new seniors are just abusing these poor freshmen, right? But I felt like we talked about it, and I was like, God, no wonder boomers were like fucking psychos. Like, Jesus Christ. And it literally was like, I even still, like, okay, Ben Affleck's character in particular, and this isn't particularly weed, I just wanted to bring it up because we're talking about Dazed and Confused. Like, he's a fucking asshole the whole time. But I feel really bad for him when he is like so embarrassed and is like he's trying to play it off like he's not mad and like he like fucking is like just drives away. And if anything, it just made me really sad about like the whole thing. And I feel like that's kind of what the movie's getting at or whatever, is just like this is these kids' power. This is the only way for them to kind of grasp power in their current positions. And like they don't really have anything else going on, and they remember that they got the shit kicked out of them when they were the freshmen, and it's finally, that's like what the one kid even says. He's like, I've been waiting 3 years for this, and it was just, I don't know, I thought that was like an interesting kind of the cycle of violence moment in the film. But yeah, and in terms of like the weed in that movie though, I feel like that Slater, that's like the main stoner kid, right? He was really funny. The part where he's talking about like George Washington, man, was for sure.
So glad you brought that up. So true. Literally true.
Literally true?
Oh, this country was like covered in hemp fields, like hemp plantations.
Oh, that's true.
That's
I
what
guess
it
you're
is.
right. Yeah.
I know, like we've talked like about the like feathered history of cannabis like in America. But yeah, totally. Oh yeah, I think all of these founding fathers were toking it up. Wow. Or at least like chewing on cannabis leaves for sure.
Benjamin Franklin for sure, because he was like, I'm gonna tie this key to this guy. I'm gonna
shit, it worked.
Yeah.
What do you think about Dazed and Confused? You actually didn't love it.
I don't know, because for me when I was watching, I was definitely sort of just taking away a very like, this is a funny, fine movie. I guess for me, I kind of wanted to have that sort of experience I had with like Wet Hot, for example,
right?
Or just like, oh, such a raunchy, fun time. And I think what you talked about, especially just about that movie, like going into it understanding it's kind of about nothing. It's more about like what you said, the vibes. And when you talk about it, I definitely recognize that stuff, but I just didn't really recognize it while I was watching it.
That's fair.
But I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, like when they're even like just when they're in the parking lot of like the bar and there's like a gas station across the street and the kid goes over there and he like gets some beer and he brings it over and it's him and his friends are like drinking it and stuff. And then they go to a party in the fucking woods and everybody's there and just stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, you're right. It feels like a summer night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
100%.
I recognize that now. I didn't really feel that way when I watched it. So if anything, that's kind of signaling to me I should probably rewatch it.
I think rewatching it with that context, you'll definitely appreciate it a little more.
Yeah, I'll probably have to put some time between it. But I mean, yeah, Woody Harrelson's fucking goofball looking character I think was really fun to watch too. But yeah, I had a good time watching it. I didn't really come away. I just don't feel like it's super memorable, but also I feel like that maybe that's kind of the point. You know what I mean? Yeah. More supposed to give you a feeling rather than a memory. Sure. Which I liked about it.
What were you, what were you trying to bring up a second ago? So
to rewind a little bit back to Harold and Kumar, a big sort of progression in that movie, right, is that the main two characters who are huge stoner potheads are not burnout people. They're very successful, very career driven, very successful people who also really enjoy weed. Right. I think a movie that was before that time and still had that stereotypical like kind of burnout character, which isn't even the word I want to use, but that's what that character is. He's not really doing anything, but it's not painted in a negative way at all. In fact, that's kind of a big part of why that character is as lovable as he is and as pure as he is. And I'm talking about the dude. Oh, right. From the Big Lebowski. Yeah, of course. His whole thing is that I don't know where he gets his money in that movie. He doesn't really have a job. Yeah. He just literally just goes day to day and just enjoys weed and he's just relaxing, man.
He smokes weed, drinks White Russians and bowls. That is his existence.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like that movie is sort of, it's not really removing that stereotype, but it's more so being like, yeah, people can also do that though, but that doesn't really make them any less of like a positive force in their life, in their day-to-day environment, right?
Yeah, I agree. One thing that I had mentioned a lot earlier that I think now is probably kind of a good time to bring it up too before we start to move on a little bit is I think there's a difference too between a stoner movie. I think there's two kinds of stoner movies. Like, there's weed movies, like all the movies that we've been mentioning, but then there's also just movies that I think are kind of in the stoner canon that can kind of be about anything and just basically mean a good movie to watch while you're high. Right. Like a lot of people consider 2001: A Space Odyssey a stoner movie. Sure. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see that. It's not about weed at all. Like that's not, but I feel like that's kind of the difference we're making here is we're definitely talking about like these weed-centric movies. Does that make...
Absolutely. And I would say like The Big Lebowski, I think that the themes of Big Lebowski are very prevalent. I'm somebody that definitely loves when a good theme jumps out, right? Yep. And is like kind of easy to adopt. And so I think that kind of the reason why the dude is such a good stoner character is I feel like cannabis in that movie, it's really all about like the surrender, right? Like the dude there, he's really not like that selfish. He is surrounded by selfish people, but it's almost like I think that the dude almost is a good portrayal of stoners because it is about like you're following your own interest, but you're never, it's like you have enough empathy that you're not like ruining other people's lives. I think there's only one like truly selfish moment where the dude, I think it's when he takes the rug, right? He's like, well, we said we could take any rug, right? I think that might be the only time where he's kind of acting outside of like an empathetic,
his normal kind ways.
Exactly. Yeah. And it really is all about like, fuck it, let's go bowling. Right. Yeah. And I think that even ties into like Harold and Kumar because it's like how do I put this? It's not a lack of motivation. Right. It's just perspective. And I think that that's something that definitely I find in like smoking weed, it gives me perspective. I think some people view that as like a motivationality. I've had a college therapist, the only like professional I've ever said I smoke weed consistently. He's like, yeah, that's probably why you're not getting anything done. And I was like, I'm rejecting this. Yeah. Do not claim this negative energy.
No.
So just so I understand, when you're talking about perspective, when it comes to smoking cannabis, right? What I'm taking from that is that you're saying when you smoke it, it helps you put into perspective that this drive and stress to be successful is way less of a thing that you need to constantly like worry about. Is that kind of what you mean?
Perfectly. Okay. And I think if you look at the dude in a lot of like who we might categorize as stereotypical stoners, I think that they really challenge like traditional masculinity. They really challenge like competition, right? Isn't there such an attitude of like, you're laid back, go with the flow. Right. Yeah. I think like Crush, the turtle from Finding Nemo. Yep. I would consider him like a stoner stereotype. And so I think that even in Dazed and Confused, I think that there's a scene where a guy makes a comment like, someone's smoking reefer, and the guy like blows up. He's like, you think I can't smoke weed? What do you gotta say to me? I'm like, people that are smoking weed every day like would not react like that. That is a you problem, sir.
God, that scene is so fucking funny. I forgot about that.
So 1,000% Jake. I think like that is definitely a trend I see across this.
Yeah. And I also sorry, I think that The Big Lebowski, I think that's like a one of the bigger positive reinforcers that I get when I watch that movie. Because even as not, somebody who doesn't have that same sort of relationship with cannabis, I just love watching that movie because it reminds me to take a second and just be like,
it's all right.
Relax, man. And take it easy. And I just like, I think that's an important takeaway. Yeah. And I think from weed culture in general, that's an important takeaway. Just as a general life perspective.
Exactly. I agree. I think that like, especially in The Big Lebowski, there's so many moments where he's like, he gets like reasonably upset and almost always is just like, all right, I guess that's what's going on. Yeah. Like one of the funniest scenes in that movie is where Julianne Moore, that's her name. That's that character. When she's like, make love to me. And then they have sex and everything. And then she's like on the bed and she's got her legs up and she's like rocking back and forth. And he's like, what are you doing? Like, I can't remember what he says to her. But then she basically just says like, it helps with conception. And he's like, what the fuck? Like, and he kind of...
He spits out his white Russian.
He speaks out his drink. And then she's like, she basically tells him like, I don't really care. Like, I don't really want you in the picture. And then, anyways, when he goes outside, he's like, man, I'm just trying to help my lady friend conceive, man. Like, it's just so, he just immediately goes with it. He's like, yeah, I guess that's just what I'm doing here, man. Like, and it's so fucking good. It's so funny.
Just finds comfort in any environment he's found in. Yeah. And I just respect that vibe. You know what I mean? Yeah. I just love that.
Absolutely.
And he loves his annoying friends to like with Walter. I'm like, he's like so patient. Like he's always just like, God damn it, Walter, please. Like, not everything's about Vietnam.
Oh God, dude. Just such a
classic
great group of characters.
Well, speaking of, I know you had notes. I want to definitely give you some time. I want to like let you say your piece and everything. But if we don't have really anything else to say, I think are we ready to move on to the final segment of the show?
Absolutely.
I think so, Isaac.
Ready? All right. We are here for the top 5 today, folks. And, in honor of all these stoner movies and everything, talking about the dude, Harold and Kumar, Slater, all these characters, we figured what better way than to give our top 5 stoners of all time. Stoner characters, I should say.
The best stogie stoners.
The best stoners of all time. Jake, Who wants to go first this week?
You won. You got to pick.
All right. I will pick, for the sake of the direction of the conversation, I will elect Makenna to go first.
Gladly. And
Okay.
we're going like fifth
Yeah, fifth down.
in reverse.
Yes,
Order.
and with your best, I suppose.
Okay. And these, I want to clarify. I told you guys this earlier. These are canon stoner characters. We have seen them light up on screen.
Gotcha.
Because I have a lot of feelings about non-canon stoner characters that we'll save. We'll save for another time. We'll save for next year's 420.
Yeah.
God, sorry. So I think that mine are going to be a little out of pocket. I'll be very surprised if any of that are on my list or on yours. But who knows?
I love
right?
that.
Who knows?
Yeah,
I
that's
love
great
that.
news.
That's the
That's
best.
wonderful
Yeah.
news.
I'm going to start with, and I will say, a lot of these come from movies that I do enjoy watching while high. I think that weed is great because it is not so serious. I think at its best, right? That's the goal. It helps you take life a little less seriously. And I think one film that encaptures that perfectly is Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. And specifically Aubrey Plaza's character, I think, is a fantastic representation of a stoner character where she's operating with her own agenda for sure. But also, I think these themes we've touched on, ultimate surrender, right? Gaining perspective. I think those are exhibited in her hijinks in that movie. So that's mine. Tatiana from Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates.
I haven't.
Portrayed by Aubrey Plaza.
I've only seen that movie once, but Aubrey Plaza. That's the name alone. That
Shit, that's
carries
starting
some
pretty
weight.
strong.
Yeah,
to be honest,
That's a good top five.
kind of got me shaking in my
Or
boots.
a
a
good
little bit.
number 5. I mean.
We'll see.
All right, number 5 for me. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna put this one in number 5 because I think a lot of people may not have seen this movie, but that's kind of why I wanted to. A lot of people know this actor, but I don't know that a lot of people have actually seen this movie, and that's kind of why I wanted to put it on my list. Number 5 for me, I'm going Floyd from True Romance.
Mhm.
Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt, one of his first roles, and he is just like, he's a total like burnout stoner in this movie, and it's so fucking funny considering everything else that's going on in the movie, and just like him being like yeah, man, like kind of burnt out on the couch. It's really funny to see Brad Pitt in that kind of role and just acting that way. And I don't think a lot of people have seen True Romance. I mean, I love that movie.
I haven't.
Yeah.
You haven't? Oh, great. It's a Quentin Tarantino script directed by Tony Scott, I think. It's got Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette. Really good movie. Highly recommend it. And yeah, Floyd, Brad Pitt as the stoner in that movie, very, very funny. That's my number 5.
He is funny, Isaac.
He is funny.
That's a good one because my number 5 is also Floyd from True Romance, but I'm gonna make a separate point about him.
All right.
I love that. I mean, typically when you see a stoner character in a movie, they're directly involved in what's going on, and so like seeing them act in the moment is what makes it funny, right? It's because they're in a different state of mind than the other people. They're not taking it as seriously, so on and so forth. This character is different because everything is happening completely outside of his realm, but he is somehow always asked about it.
Yeah.
Like there's a point where somebody comes and be like, what's going on? And he's like, and then he just sits there and he explains it to the best he can, even though he's not related at all. And it's so fucking funny, dude.
Yeah.
It's funny too because you don't even see him that much in the movie. That's pretty much
He's in the movie for like maybe 5 minutes total.
all of 5 of those minutes he's on the couch.
Yeah, 100%.
His impact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So for somebody who, even for like, I like True Romance. I just don't really remember it that well. But Floyd is one of the standout like parts of it in my mind, and that's pretty impressive considering he's only in it for those 5 minutes. So Floyd's my number 5, Isaac.
All right, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Makenna.
Impressive. All right, here's another one.
Is this where we
Might
separate?
be a deep cut. Who knows? This might be your number 4 as well. But I chose the character who is only known by the name of Sam in the film Walk Hard. You guys seen Walk Hard?
The Dewey Cox
John
story?
C. Reilly. Yeah, the Dewey Cox story.
Yes, I
There's
have.
one scene specifically where Dewey walks in on Sam and his entourage, I'll say, and they're all smoking weed, right? And he's like, "Oh, I can't believe you're doing this, man." And he's like, "Good. Well, you want to try, right? You want to try a little hit?" Dewey Cox is like, "No, I don't want a hangover." And it's just, it's a pretty short scene, but it's just basically Sam saying like, "It doesn't give you a hangover. It's non-habit forming. It actually makes sex better." I think it does a great job of like breaking down like how silly the opposition to cannabis is. So that was my number 4.
That is a deep cut. God, these are all movies that I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about the Dewey Cox, Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. Okay, number 4 for me. Let me look at my list and pick what's going on number 4. Okay, number 4 for me. This one I'm putting here because this character, I'm hoping that he's not also on your list because we'll see. Number 4 for me, I'm going Marty from The Cabin in the Woods, played by Fran Kranz, however you say it. He is the stoner character in The Cabin in the Woods. One of the most like iconic scenes in that movie is where he stumbles out of his RV, just hotboxing it, smoke's rolling out, and he's got his big bong, and then he like Inspector Gadget collapses it down into like a little tumbler, like coffee drink. Yeah, hilarious. And he's also a character who like he plays his stereotypical role. I mean, Cabin in the Woods is a very self-aware kind of satire movie, and he very much plays that role super well. But he also kind of fits that like anti-stereotype where in the end he truly is like one of the most efficient people in this movie, like and he ends up being truly selfless in that. Maybe you wouldn't say that, where he does in fact, you've seen the movie, right? It's a spoiler alert for the end of it, but where they sacrifice the world or whatever. But Marty from The Cabin in the Woods, for me, he's iconic. I'm going with that.
That's a good pick, Isaac. That's a really good pick. My number 4,
I thought you were going to say, is also Marty.
Is Ron Slater from Dazed and Confused. We talked about him already.
Yeah.
The philosophical just mind and just like you already talked about, his whole thing about like George Washington and shit like that. It's just so funny. And every time it happens, it just spirals into this just absurd conversation. I think that was just a really funny part of the movie. I think he's not breaking any ground as a stoner character, but I think he's one of the most beloved.
He keeps it simple. He wears a beanie and just a big weed shirt.
Shirt, long hair.
Straight to the point.
Exactly.
There's no confusion.
It's especially funny because like those are like the two most contrasting like colors you could have.
Yeah.
It's so loud. I love it.
Yeah, very funny character.
Speaking of I don't fucking know.
You're going to make a loud joke.
I was going to make a loud joke. Yeah. Where are we going with number 3?
All right, number 3, I actually, let's see. I did settle on Jane from Smiley Face, Anna Faris.
Damn.
I think Anna Faris is such a perfect, like, actress to play a stoned character. Like, I think that it's really chaotic, right? Laugh out loud funny, so funny. And I think it's innocent in that we've all been in it. Maybe I'm painting with a broad brush here, but I think that a lot of people that smoke weed can relate to being in maybe a professional scenario where you might be a little more lifted than you feel prepared to handle your certain situation with. And I think she just does a great job of making us laugh while she's navigating that.
I have got to check that movie.
Yeah,
it's really on my watch list. That's my favorite part about doing these episodes is all the movies I didn't watch. I'm still like, God, well, now I got to still watch those.
Honestly.
Even more reason though.
Yeah, for the sequel episode, like you said. Okay.
What's your stupid damn pick?
Number 3 you said was Jane, right? Okay.
That's right.
Number 3, I think this is a really fun one. When I remembered this character, I was like, oh, that has got to go on the list. That has got to go on the list. Number 3 for me, I'm going Shorty Meeks. Marlon Wayans from the Scary Movie franchise.
That is a good one.
He is, listen, how can you not put the guy who smokes out Ghostface on your list, right?
That's a good one.
The whole like really that whole scene, hilarious. He's one of the, I mean, he wrote the movie, but like,
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Wayans brothers made those movies.
That's cool.
At least the original couple. But those movies, for as really bad as a lot of them are, the weed stuff in it is very fucking funny. And that entire sequence of like them on the phone is the whole what's up going back and forth.
Ghostface mask change.
Yeah, changes like a big high face. Yeah. So
it's so funny.
The great equalizer.
Yeah, exactly. You said the common denominator, even amongst serial killers, we can all find some common ground. So number 3 for me, Shorty Meeks from Scary Movie.
That's a good one. That's a good pick, Isaac.
Thank you. What do you got for number 3?
My number 3 is Marty from Cabin in the Woods. Oh yeah, everything Isaac said. The first time you see him, I think this is a great example too of what we talked about too about the ingenuity behind some stoners to get the high, and immediately just make it seem like you weren't even there at all, right? Case in point, the first time you see him, he's just out of his mind high. Smoke to the top of the roof of the car, right? He comes out. It's just a tumbler. I got my coffee in here.
Yeah,
There's
no
nothing
biggie.
else in here, officer.
Yeah.
Can I go now? Right?
Am I being detained?
But also, yeah, another great example too is when they're actually in the scenario.
Right.
There's some stupid funny story reason about how like the cannabis he's smoking makes it so he's like immune to the pheromones or hormones or whatever they're using. That makes them like stupid and like over masculine and horned up and all that stuff. But I also think it's cool because I like how that character is like very aware of his like friends' mannerisms and shit like that, and he is immediately like, "You're acting fucking weird."
Yeah, why are you acting like this?
I really like that. I like how he's like he's just like he's very he just recognizes that. I thought that was a nice little touch, but also yeah, I just think he's really funny, and I like that he's one of the ending characters of the movie. So
yeah,
Marty is my number 3.
Marty the empath.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
All right, down to the top 2. Here we go.
This is where things
already.
get real tight here, McKenna.
I think I'm going to change who my number 2 and my number 1 were.
Go
That
for
happens.
it.
That
We do
happens.
last minute changes all the time.
That happens.
Great. Oh, I'm among friends. Okay, then my number 2 is Seth Rogen playing himself in the classic film This Is the End.
I love that.
I already, I shared my praise of Seth Rogen earlier, but I think I love there is one scene where he just comes out, and I think the iconic line is "Let's do all the drugs." And I will say that like maybe the stoner character or even the stoner friend, like in real life, really fills that role well. It's like, you guys like drugs, and I think that Seth Rogen is somebody who. He is interested in you having a good time, right? I think it comes from a place of empathy where he's like, I love doing these drugs. I would love to have you guys do these drugs with me.
Have that experience.
Have a great time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think
that's mine.
I think also too a part that's really stand out for me in that movie is when he first has he like picks up his friend from the airport or whatever, and then he goes to his house and just he does all this cute stuff with weed. He spells out his friend's J in J's.
Yeah,
I thought that was so funny. That's
Yeah.
such a cute thing. And like their thing together is that they like just get high and they play video games together. So that's exactly what they did, despite like him being a loaded millionaire. He's like, yeah, we're just gonna get high, play some video games, eat some pizza. I thought that was really cute.
Classic.
It's the little things.
It's a good pick. It's a good pick.
Okay. I will. You may push back on this one then, specifically because of your theory on the list.
Can't wait.
I'm going with a non-canon stoner for my number 2. Damn, Jacob, you're really gonna end on the same top 2 here.
I think we might.
Number 2 for me is Shaggy, baby.
All right.
Mary Jane, that's like my favorite name. That is the Shaggy as a character is the pinnacle non-stoner stoner. The iconic most non-canon stoner is for sure Shaggy in my mind. And although we don't see him smoke any actual weed, the innuendos are there enough for it to count for me. So number 2 for me is Shaggy in all instances of Scooby-Doo, but if I have to put a name on it, I'll pick Matthew Lillard in Scooby-Doo 1.
I respect it.
Yeah.
Food motivated, right? Those munchies are apparent.
Great
Absolutely.
friend.
Great friend.
Who him and Scooby remain the core of that friend group no matter how often they splinter. He's like, come on, you guys, like.
That's right.
And him and Scooby always stay broed out.
He wants that gang.
Yeah.
To get along.
Exactly. He's a family man. So number 2 for me, Shaggy.
That's a good pick, Isaac. You literally used the exact same line I was gonna use.
Sorry, dude. Been saving it for the whole episode.
I was really excited to do it because I do a really good Shaggy impression.
I'll let you do it again, and I'll name the episode that just in honor of you.
Mary Jane. That's like my favorite name.
That's really I should have let you do it. You're right.
Thanks.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, my number
Dead
2 is
on.
fucking Shaggy. What can you do about it?
Jake's number 2 is Shaggy.
I bet our fucking number 1s are gonna be the same
Jake's
too.
number 2 is the recording artist known as Shaggy.
Yeah, he's my canon pick. Is the animated series voice actor.
Yeah.
Wasn't me.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's your number 2 then?
Yeah.
All right. McKenna.
Number 1.
Yeah. We can do honorable mentions if you have an honorable mention if you have like a whole list and you felt bad taking one off. Go ahead and pick.
Yeah,
Now's the time for honorable mention.
Gladly. So glad you gave me the opportunity because I was going to say, I think Bilbo Baggins and Gandalf the Grey to be really big stoner vibes. There's a scene where they're just kicking back, smoking, blowing some smoke circles. I really respect
Big
that.
old pipe.
Absolutely. I'm a pro smoking household.
Absolutely.
I think that there is definitely like a sacredness in being outside and just blowing some O's with your buddy. I think that's definitely a trope that we've examined over this 2 hours and 8 minutes that we've been conversing about cannabis. So those are my honorable mentions. And I mentioned, I guess, one last one that is another deep cut. Really think the pigeon lady in Home Alone gives off huge stoner vibes. I think she's wise. I think she gets it. I think she's got a relationship with those pigeons that could only be fostered by somebody that takes like exploring their place and their connection with others very seriously. I think that is classic stoner vibes.
Classic stoner vibes. If I had to pick an honorable mention, I'd probably give it to Harold and Kumar. See, that was the one that originally earlier I told you if you were going to make me pick one or the other. But then I remembered Marty, and I was like, oh, actually, I'll throw Marty on my list. That's a good one.
Clever.
But Harold and Kumar, I'll give them the honorable mention. Great stoner duo. And they represent that role very well. Honorable mention for you?
I don't have any. I guess I would just say Seth Rogen in that, and this is the end. Or most of his roles, really.
Seth Rogen existed.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Number one.
Number one, I think my personal number one stoner character is Ilana Glazer from Broad City. I think she's a
great pick.
That's a good one.
There are some specific things. God, so sorry.
You're
We're
totally
be full
fine.
of this. We're in
we do that all day.
Oh,
yeah.
Wacky
that was a rough one.
We're just in a silly, goofy mood.
Yeah,
this
just a
420
bunch of
episode.
silly friends.
But I think things that push Ilana Glazer over the edges, number one for me, are Gen Z representation. Very important. Shows how weed is being carried to the future. I think she's generous with her cannabis, spreads it amongst her friends evenly and generously. I think I said that twice, as any good stoner.
Right.
Okay, really, you can cut this out, but that just reminded me. My favorite part of The Big Lebowski is when the narrator literally mid-sentence is like, well, I forgot what I was talking about.
Yeah.
That is perfect, like, stoner representation too. But I also think she's really creative. Same thing. We're smoking out of apples. We're smoking out of pineapples. We are vacuuming up the weed from the cracks between our couches to savor it. I just think, yeah, perfect. Also love queer representation. I think that a lot of queer people probably partake in cannabis, and so I love to see it. What more can I say?
That is
queen.
Honestly a great. I am disappointed that Broad City didn't even cross my mind because that is a great pick.
It's a wonderful pick.
Didn't even think about that. Okay, give me a second here because I may give Jake the number one just so that we have a little more than one difference on our list.
This is the monolith top 5 now.
Pretty much might as well be. Oh man, I really got to rack my brain to think of one more stoner who really could deserve this top spot. You want to go first while I think? You want me to just say it?
I mean, it's up to you. You're on the throne, Isaac. You're on the throne.
The number one that it truly came down to for me was the dude. It wasn't number one until we watched the movie again yesterday.
I love that.
And then I was like, yeah, he really is like the perfect stoner character. But I will say the damn Broad City, that one, that is great. That is a great pick. So yeah, my number one is the dude, Jake. Who did you pick for number one?
Well, let me just say, sometimes you eat the bar, sometimes the bar eats you.
Is he not supposed to be saying bear?
Yeah, Sam Elliott, you know.
Because the subtitle says bear.
Yeah.
And I was like,
it's the bar.
He's saying bar.
Sometimes the bar eats you. Sometimes you eat the bar.
Sometimes you eat the bar.
And you know what, Isaac? For your number one, that's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah, sure is.
Number one's the dude. It can't go any other way. Because you know why, everybody? You know why, audience? Because the dude abides.
Yeah.
Period.
He certainly does.
Yeah.
He certainly does.
He fits the attitude.
That is it.
You know, on all the top 5s we've done so far, this is probably one of the last ones I expected us to cross over so much on.
I 100% agree. I thought for sure.
Wow.
There was ones I intentionally left off because I was like, Jake will probably pick that one, so I'll give him that one. I'll put this one instead.
Yeah, that sure backfired, didn't it?
Yeah, that's all right.
In fact, I actually had to reorganize my list because otherwise we would have had the exact same top 5. So,
Oh my God.
Well, what can you say? We're men of similar tastes, right?
I'll say. Wait, before we wrap up,
Okay.
I actually have a genuine question.
Sure.
I hope it doesn't go too long. I'm genuinely curious about this. I think it's the best way to ask about it.
Love it.
I was not familiar that that marijuana is like a not good term.
Yeah, we forgot
Could
to
you
bring
guys
that up.
tell me about that? Why that is?
Gladly. We can get into it.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
I mean, what I know is I think that Isaac did a good job of, we can't have a conversation as 3 white people about weed without talking about like its cultural implications.
For sure.
Right. Period. Right. And so my understanding, the term marijuana became popularized because a lot of I have no idea as far as like timelines that this is happening. Right. I'm going to say like, I don't know, cowboy days. There's a different word
1800s?
for that.
Yeah, sure.
Right. But
the frontier days.
that's exactly what I was looking for. Frontier days. Thank you. So a lot of the weed that we would know as weed, right, was coming from Mexico, right? And they would refer to it as marijuana. I can't remember like the exact, like if you know the etymology around like where marijuana came from, but it was
somewhere
derogatory.
in Mexico. Yeah.
Right. And so just like, buckaroo is kind of an American bastardized version of the Spanish word vaquero, which is a cowboy, right? I think that they co-opted it and, of course, made people of color the scapegoat, per usual.
Yeah, as far as I was gonna say, pretty much that's like exactly the only thing that I know or that I like have heard about it or whatever is that like it was almost always referred to as cannabis, always, until it was basically kind of realized that the association could be directly linked with Mexicans by just calling it marijuana. So it's not that the word itself is like, I think that's like what it was called in Mexico or whatever, but it's kind of like similar to Hispanic. Like it's like, it's like a word that we've kind of adopted as vernacular, but like where that comes from, it kind of has like really negative connotations or whatever.
Okay.
So it's not like anti-PC to say marijuana or anything. It's kind of become larger than that in and of itself. It's just that became the popularized term in American like media usage, specifically because it was assisting in demonizing weed by connecting it to like Mexican people.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for explaining that to me. I didn't know that.
If you refer to cannabis, weed, pot as marijuana, I'm like, you're fucking cough.
You're a narc.
It is
narc.
Definitely a weird way to say it, like marijuana. Like I don't know.
Not to go to the garage and smoke some marijuana.
Yeah, I feel like
Okay, Hank Hill.
Yeah, literally, I feel like it's a joke if you're saying that. You know what? I'll change my number 1 right now.
Oh.
Boom Hauer.
Oh, baby.
No, I'm just kidding. I won't do that.
All right.
But he's kind of a stoner, I would say.
Who's that?
Boom Hauer from King of the Hill.
Oh, of course I know. Classic. That
Have
was my
you
number
seen
1
King
too.
of the Hill?
Yeah, of course. I'm more of a Bobby guy myself.
Bobby's hilarious too. Bobby's hilarious. He's more of a smoker though.
Yeah.
Remember the episode where Hank makes him smoke a whole pack?
Oh my god.
Classic stuff.
Classic.
Well, guys, guess it's time we wrap up this joint.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you for saying that. And I think you're just about right. We're clocking in at a solid 4 hours and 20 minutes right now, folks. So there's no better time to wrap it up. Thank you for listening this week. I'm Isaac. You can follow me on everything at Isaac Ramen. Jake, where can people find you?
You can find me anywhere worth noting at _moonscented. I'm going to give it over to Makenna where she can tell you where you can find her.
Before she tells you where you can find her, I also just want to say thank you, Makenna, so much for coming on this episode. It's been great to get your perspective and your insights and your knowledge about all of this. We specifically wanted to have you on because I was like, McKenna, Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius will be a great addition. Will bring great insight and we'll make a very fun topic. That's the best way to do it, is fun topics that have some serious implications. So thank you so much for being on for this episode.
A dear friend of the pod.
My pleasure.
And a wonderful artist.
Absolutely.
Speaking of, you recently painted our new logo, which I love, by the way. It is absolutely extravagant.
I'll
It's
admit,
wonderful.
I did it under the influence, but thank you guys. This has been a joy. I am honored. It is so great getting, like I said it off air, but I'll say it on air so that the audience knows. It's been so fun watching you guys grow this podcast. And I'll say, when I became friends with you, beginning of our relationship, I was a huge film idiot, really had no appreciation for it. I'll say still self-identifying film idiot, but you guys have given me like a brand new appreciation for watching movies, for the culture of film. So I really appreciate it. And thank you for all of the kind words last week. And especially the shout out for my everything everywhere all
wonderful
at once
review.
Great review.
Love that film. But
Great
seriously, I have a total brand new respect and appreciation for film since becoming friends with you guys. So I had so much fun. So high. I know we all smoked 4 joints before. 4.20 joints.
Yeah, what this
before we
one
started filming.
A notch in my positive experience belt.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna make a new Patreon tier called Film Idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please, I'm
a good
happy
one.
to be a recurring guest. I really think you guys need to get behind ASMR. I've been listening to your previous episodes. I think that is a field you guys really need to explore. You're definitely missing out.
A corner
Build
of the
your
market.
ASMR
Yeah.
content. Yeah.
Good to know. That's good to know.
That'll be our secondary podcast.
So where can people find you and more of your reviews?
You can, and if you try, you'll
We'll
regret
find
it.
you. Yeah. Do you have anything that you're usually like we don't I don't know if there's really anything that you need to is there anything you want to plug, whether it's something that you're working on or just something you want to call attention to? You mentioned something earlier about the prison project or something.
Yeah, I'm no, catching me on the spot. I am 99% sure that the Last Prisoner Project puts a good majority of their efforts and their funds towards people that are either wrongfully imprisoned for cannabis use and just building awareness towards like we are literally having conversations around like how freely we can access cannabis. People are getting rich off of the cannabis industry. It has become so marketed, so capitalized on, and we have people that are spending like life sentences for like a gram of weed. So truly a disgrace on this country. And I think that if we were to track how cannabis has been portrayed and demonized in the war on drugs, we don't even get into it. We're at 4.5 hours already. But I'll plug that Last Prisoner Project. Follow them on Instagram.
Perfect. Thank you once again, Makenna. You can follow the podcast in general on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at Monolith Pod. If you haven't signed up for the Patreon yet, please consider doing so. We just recorded a pre-show for this week's episode, as well as a new bonus episode that's locked behind the paywall will be coming out next week. Speaking of next week, Jake's going on a cruise. I'm going on a little vacation. So we will be off air for the next week. But the bonus episode will be there for the Patreons who are a little lonely and want to hear some voices. So thank you so much for listening this week. Anything else we need to plug before we wrap it up? Oh yeah, yes there is. What am I thinking? Shout out to Cassette Drift for the music. You can find the podcast on any app. Get a pro patron account on Letterboxd, MONOLITH for 20% off, I think. Something like that.
20% off.
I always forget.
Pro and patron accounts.
Pro and patron accounts. I think that just about does it.
Leave a review.
Yeah, leave a review. Thank you so much for listening this week. And as always, folks, thank you for smoking.
All right, let's rip this freaking bong.